It's really, really wonderful to see you all. I'm a spoken word poet. I'm also a writer. So I write both page poetry as well as short stories. But poetry is, basically where my soul is. I live in New Delhi, which is known for being quite a gray city. But behind the dullness, there is a, wonderful community of people who support each other, and there's a really, really wonderful community of people who care about the arts. So I think people who are from Delhi would agree about how we are, a space which is very conducive for the arts. Both poetry as well as a lot of performance arts is, actively supported by cultural centers that are here, by the embassies that are here, as well as I think, the schools and colleges in Delhi have, their own societies, their own clubs. So everyone has like a little thing going on, which encourages people to speak up and to express themselves more freely. I've been writing for as long as I can remember. And I think I've been reading for even longer. So growing up, I used to read a lot of different books. R.K. Narayan, I used to read How to Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and as well as, Ruskin Bond, of course. I think, a lot of his stories, inspired me, to travel more and to live in nature also for a while. All right, it's really good to see a couple of more people joining us. Divisha, and we have Amala also joining us from Chennai. So, yeah, to continue wherever I left off. So, I am a writer as well as a reader. And I think reading particularly influenced me in the ways that I started caring a lot about, finding those solitary moments, those quiet moments in life where you can introspect into the world inside than, the world outside. So a lot of, how we live our lives and conduct ourselves in our day to day is, directed towards, our sensory pleasures. So whether it's, eating or socializing or, walking or finding moments of comfort, those sensory pleasures are in play. However, with, I think, particularly reading, I started realizing how important it is to go in the world inside. And that's how my writing journey also began, in those quiet moments. And I started writing about things that I found ordinary in my own life, like perhaps, walking my dog or, spending time at my grandparents' house. But I started realizing because our life's experiences are very unique for each and every one of us, those ordinary moments were actually extraordinary when they were on paper. And that was my way of connecting with people. Writing really empowered me to realize that, the life I live and the life you live are so particularly unique that when we manage to write it and chronicle it, it can be of service to the communities around us. It can help us connect with each other on a deeper level, on a very human level, where we really know each other's experiences, perceptions, weaknesses, and we build each other up through that kind of sharing. And I think that's what has, inspired my journey as a writer, as well as the founder of Delhi Poetry Slam. It has really inspired me to create a platform where people can be themselves, where people can be authentic, and where they can express themselves and whatever they're going through in life, whether it is, reestablishing a relationship with your parents when you grow up, whether it is, something about moving to a new town, leaving home, learning to live independently on your own. Our life journeys can be chronicled through our writing of poetry and through our sharing of this poetry. Yes, I think that's basically about me. Delhi Poetry Slam as an organization provides, emerging poets with that kind of platform to explore career options in both writing and publishing. I will allow Shrishti to introduce herself briefly now, and then we can move on to our agenda for today. Shrishti, your mic is off.
Yeah, I figured. I figured. Hi, everyone. So good to see you all. I'm the co-founder of Delhi Poetry Slam and long admirer of the creative intelligence that people often showcase at our poetry events and, just the community that we have created. The background story of Delhi Poetry Slam is, I just like to share a little bit of it. It's both fascinating as well as complex. We started back in 2013, and while you all know how passionate our country is for poetry, every other person that you get to meet will say that they're a shire or they're a kavi. Like the minds of Indians itself is very poetic in the way they think, in the way they express. So there is no dearth of poetry and influences of poetry in this country. But back in 2013, we were already seeing a decline in the sales of poetry books, and there wasn't really a community for poets. We used to have a lot of Kavi Sammelans, but it was not a place where youth were more comfortable going. And we just felt like poetry was not cool, which is why a lot of young people were hesitant to be a part of it. So the idea was to take poetry and give it a new outfit. And when we did that, it became fashionable. We started organizing open mic, slam poetry events, and it just started to catch on. People started doing the same thing. A lot of poetry forums started in India. There were lots of self publishing companies that started in India. And young people, we saw that they were heavily invested now to write poetry. So earlier, I think there was a pressure among the youth to write poetry like Shelley, Wordsworth, or whatever they were reading in school. But now we saw that poets were just writing poetry to express, and they were using the language that they already had access to without the pressure. And the key idea here was that they just needed to express, not to have feelings and emotions bottled inside, but to be able to express. This was the change we were seeing, and we were trying to create a platform for it. And now we're in our 10th year. So it's been a decade of doing Delhi Poetry Slam. And now we have a poetry studio in the heart of the city, which is always open for poets and artists who come here and, they do their poetry events, and they take part in workshops. And there's just this community where poets can come together and share ideas, as well as how do we get our stories out there, our poetry out there. Because the reason we write is because we have a lot to contribute to the world. There is so much within us, and our story is so unique. I think Saumya was already touching upon that. Our story is so unique that it needs to be out there for people to read and for people to experience it. So, the idea here today, where we are sitting here with I see about 10 participants at the moment, and I think a lot more are going to be joining. Today, this evening, is that how do we get our words out there? How do we get plenty of readers around the world to experience what we experience through our words? And that is basic foundation of the Writer's Launchpad. And I welcome you all today. And let the fun begin. We will wait for Karuna to participate in the event. She is one of my favorite poets too, and I've been following her work for such a long time. I love her style. I love the way she puts out poetry. She has made poetry super cool and fun. So we're very excited to have her today. And yeah, so happy to see you all from different parts of India and the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shrishti, for talking about our mission and talking about our journey, which has been 10 years, but it was very well condensed into the core of it, the soul of it. So today, as far as the agenda goes, today we will be covering the how to perfect the art of writing poetry, how to connect with people. So writing has a lot to do with the emotional value of it, but also how we structure it for clarity and for impact. So today we'll be covering that. And tomorrow we will be plunging into the technicalities of writing as well as publishing content. And mostly we'll be touching upon, how to publish content online to build a readership. But we will also briefly, talk about, having a debut collection of poetry. Or some of you, I know you've already published one particular book, but if you have a book like that, then how do you find, a readership for it? How do you find, people to connect with it? So tomorrow will be more into the technical aspect of things, and today I think we will be covering the creative aspect of things. So I'll just briefly talk about the Zoom etiquette, and then we will have a very small warm up. So the Zoom etiquette for today's workshop is we will normally be keeping our microphones off when the host is speaking. This is just, as a precaution because sometimes, we have disturbances in the ambience of wherever we are, particularly. This event is also being recorded. So I just wanted to let you know that, with this particular event is being recorded on cloud, and I will be sharing the recordings by Tuesday or Wednesday next week. And the event is fully flexible to attend. So if you would like to leave shortly for a break or to, grab a bite or something like that, you can do so. If you have any questions or comments at all, or you would like to add in something, or you find that you need clarification on something that's happening, feel free to let us know in the comment section. And we'd be happy, Shrishti and I would be happy to, let you know how things are going and help you out there. All right. So for a very small warm up, I have a question for all the participants who are here today, and we can probably go one by one. And you can let us know, how you're feeling today. So I want to ask you in a very fun way, what animal do you feel like today? All right. And to begin with, I think if I had to answer that question, I would say that I feel like the white rabbit because I'm running a little late to things. So that's me for today. And I think, Shrishti, you can go next, and then I can call one by one the participants.
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Should I be honest? I feel like a dog today. I'm extremely hungry and greedy for food. All day I've been having cravings. So I feel like, that dog in that story where he's like wanting to eat that roti. So yeah, I feel like a dog today.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Amala, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi Saumya, hi everyone. Happy to meet you all in this evening, first of all. And I do feel as a butterfly because my journey started with butterfly. So I feel as that butterfly where it has landed at the place actually where it is waiting to land. So I feel as a butterfly today, and I'm very happy to be part of this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amala. It's wonderful to meet you as well. All right. Ankita, would you like to go next?
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone. Sorry, at that time I could not connect my camera. And yeah, so I think that I usually feel like a panda lying down and all. But today I feel a bit like a tortoise that everyone is going ahead of me somewhere. I'm lagging behind or something like that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ankita. It's
Thank you.
wonderful to see you. And
Yeah, wonderful to talk to
yeah,
you guys also.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Um, Devisha, would you like to share what you feel like today?
Hi everyone, I'm Divisha. I'm really happy to be here. And animal, at least what I'm inspiring to be today is definitely a dolphin because they're quite social in nature. And I feel like I'm connecting to that sense and I'm trying to be much more social, trying to absorb the energies around, trying to absorb the thoughts that are flowing around. And I feel like it's a really great place to be. And that's all that I'm hoping for.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Devisha. All right, Kadambari, do you want to go next?
Very good evening to all of you. I hope I'm audible. So I am feeling like a crow today who is thirsty for knowledge and who wants to gain a lot from this workshop today. So I feel like a crow who is thirsty to know more about poetry and to gain more knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Kadambari. And it's really wonderful to hear about, your inspiration to be here today. Next, we will ask Kritika if you'd like to share.
Um, Really, I feel like an elephant where I have a lot of things to be shared and a lot of things to be learned from this workshop. And probably this would be my restart of my writing journey, probably after a decade or so. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you, Kritika. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, Parnika, if you'd like to share what you're feeling like.
Sure. I feel like a bird who's full of hope, and I just feel that my voice is finally heard. Like people like hear my poems and and maybe they know me now. Like I'm heard. I feel special. I feel good.
Thank you, Parnika. And yeah, we're looking forward to knowing more about your work as well today. All right, Sonali, would you like to share what you feel like today?
So I have a beaver in my garden who comes and collects twigs and makes dams. As you know, beavers make dams. So I feel like a beaver because I want to take all of this emotional energy everybody's brought and I want to channel it into something beautiful at the end of this week, hopefully.
Thank you, Sonali. Thank you for sharing that. Upmanyu, would you like to share what animal you feel like today?
For the last, for this week, I've been feeling like a sloth, mainly like very lazy, not doing anything, that sort of thing. But today, maybe sort of like you have that kangaroo or rabbit, I don't know, like in chocolate, they have the pantuf rabbit. So he was wounded first, and then he got, as his leg improved, he hopped away. So today, just trying to, maybe the wounds have healed, and so like wanting to know new things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Upmanyu, for sharing that. And I feel like I'm meeting a lot of different humans with animal moods. And all of you have brought so much to the table already with, sharing honestly um, what you feel like. And I hope that, the next 2 days puts you in a different mindset, in a unique mindset, because some of you are already coming with a different mindset. So in a unique mindset to think differently about your writing, because all of us are going to be contributing in this journey that we have together. All of us are going to be contributing in each other's works. There's as much to learn from you as you have to learn from me or the Delhi Poetry Slam team or Karuna. So we're really excited to be on this collaborative journey together. All right, so I think yeah, that's for the little warm up, and we will be proceeding today with 2 or 3 different themes, and they will be explored throughout. So of course, we will be proceeding with how what the writing process is and what the writing journey is for us, and how to become more consistent with that work, how to overcome writer's block, because we are here with the professional guidance of Karuna Ezara Parikh, and she having written 2 very wonderful books, The Heart Asks Pleasure First and Where Stories Gather, which is her collection of poetry. um, she would be able to advise us on how to find that writing style, that writing consistency, overcoming writer's block, as well as how to write for an audience that you wish to connect with. And we are very, very happy to introduce Karuna, who is already with us here today. And Karuna is the author of 2 books. She's also a screenwriter, and she has been, multi-talented personality. And I've been following her journey for almost the last 2 years. Coincidentally, we happened to meet back in 2023 for one or two events. But she's just a wonderful writer, very passionate writer, and I think the themes that she explores are both individual as well as collective. So her works are very relevant to society and how we together can have more compassion towards each other and more understanding towards each other, which is what the point of poetry is all about. So we are looking forward to the workshop and the session with Karuna. I think we are 5 minutes ahead of time, but we can just give it a go. So I'd like to very warmly welcome Karuna to start with her session now. All right, we're waiting for her to join in. I can see that she's here and I've asked her to unmute, but there might be a bit of a technical lag. All right, that's okay. I think before she logs back in, I'm not exactly sure if she's preparing or getting ready or it's a technical lag, but I think we may have missed out with that particular question. The what animal are you feeling like question with Anvesha, and we did not have an introduction for her either. So Anvesha, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us, what animal you're feeling like today. So we can just do that for the next 2 minutes before Karuna joins back in.
Hi, yes, actually, I'm traveling, so that's why I won't be able to turn on my camera. I hope that's not a problem.
No issues.
Okay. So today, I feel like an ant because I have been working. Like in the morning, I was working, and then after afternoon, after having lunch and all, we have been traveling. So I've been working, doing schoolwork and everything. So I felt like ants, they put in so much effort to build their ant hill, and they're constantly struggling and doing things. So just today, I feel like an ant. Although for the past few days in my life, I've been feeling a little bit low because of as summer vacations are going on and we all just been lazy, not doing too much work. But now, a few days like before the school opens, I'm working more, and so I feel a little bit more like a hustler today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anvesha, and thank you for being so passionate as to join us while you have while you're on traveling. So it's really wonderful to have you in our company today. And I do notice that although we do have a few more participants who are men, but they're not joining us yet. So it's I think 90% women here today, but I feel, yeah, I feel very safe. And
Mhm.
yeah, it was just a coincidence that somehow I realized. Yeah, I think women do have a very creative side and a very much, a side to express themselves. Um, and somehow it just needs that initial grounding before it can really become that the potential can really become something kinetic. So I think we can move on with Karuna's session now. I think she is here with us because her video is on. Karuna, a very warm welcome from Delhi Poetry Slam and all the participants here today. We are really excited to be here in your presence and to learn with you as well as to work with you in developing our artwork.
Hi, Saumya. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Can you all hear me all right? Okay. Saumya, it's so good to see you again. And I was just listening to what kind of animal everyone was and was feeling like today. And I was thinking about it myself, and I couldn't come up with one. And I thought, and I don't know why, the first thing that came to mind for no good reason was a beaver. And I was like, am I building something? Am I, like why that? And so I love listening to everyone else's descriptions of exactly why they were feeling like the animal they were. And I often do this when I'm kind of, trying to come back into my body, but also in the poetry mind. So it's like, what color are you today? What song are you today? So I always find that that's a very good centering exercise. So yeah, Soumya, that one resonated a lot with me. So, hi everybody. Are we waiting, Soumya? Are we waiting for some more people, or do we want to start?
I think we can start now. There are a couple of participants who might be late, so they will join us as and when they do find the time.
Sure, sure. Okay, so I'm Karuna. Hi, I'm an author, I'm a poet, and I've published two books. One was a novel, and one was a book of poetry. And because we're here for the purpose of poetry today, I'm going to kind of focus on the story of that book a little bit, but I'm also going to speak about how it links with my work as a novelist as well, and even as a journalist and a nonfiction writer. And I hope that's, helpful to you guys. If there's any questions at any point, please feel free to ask them. I'd love for this to be interactive in any way. I can't intuit what you'd like to know. So tell me at any point if you're like, but tell us more about that, or why did that happen like that? Please go ahead. I'm here for all of it, and we will do questions at the end. Um, if there's anything in particular you'd like to know, we'll keep like a nice block of time for that. But otherwise, I'm just gonna kind of start. So just to come back to my works, um, I was someone who always wrote. Now, that does not necessarily mean that you can't start writing later in life or at a particular time later, if you, kind of one day wake up and feel the muse. Um, I don't actually subscribe to this idea that you need to kind of be born a poet, or you need to have been writing from day one. I did write from a very young age, and I kind of always felt like I want to be a writer. I went to journalism school because that was kind of the only lucrative, the only way to make money from my writing. So I went to study journalism, all of that. But I feel like I've come across so much beautiful work over the years from people who actually migrated to writing from other careers. One example is one of my best friends in the literary world, Anchal Malhotra. So Anchal was an artist and she studied art history and things like that. And then she decided to actually write down stories of partition, starting with stories from her family, and eventually, decided that writing was for her. I took her name because I think most of you will have heard of her, and she's also a dear friend. So, I know I speak the truth when I say that it's not like she decided from day one that she wanted to be a writer. But the fact that all of you are here means you have, to some extent, decided that you want to write and that you do write, right? Um, so I started writing very early on. And I will be honest that though I always felt, oh, I'm going to write a novel someday, I'm going to write a book someday, what I did consistently was actually write poetry. And I don't think I realized that myself. You are not working on a novel every single day of your life, but you can work on words every single day of your life. And just because of the way poetry is formatted, it of course becomes easier to work on poetry more frequently than you would work on like a larger body of work. So without realizing it, I actually started writing poetry um, long before I probably had a semblance of a successful novel in my mind, right? Even though I didn't accept that, like I didn't realize it, because a lot of poetry, it's so personal, right? You don't even realize when you're putting together a poem. You're scribbling in a journal. You're writing down something in a moment of heartbreak on the back of a napkin in a cafe. You're sending a postcard to someone and two lines appear from somewhere. That's poetry, right? So I feel like very always that what we're doing is writing poetry, because it's not entirely intentional. Is Am I stuck? Hi, I'm just Saumya.
We can still hear you. We can still see you and hear you. Can you hear us? Okay, now there is a lag.
Awesome,
There,
because everyone
th-
else is stuck for.
all right, we can. Yeah, you're back.
Okay, awesome. It's telling me my internet is unstable. You know, I'm. Yeah. So where was I? So yeah, so I was speaking about, the fact that I always wanted to be a writer, but I don't think I ever said, oh, I want to be a poet, right? And about 10 years or 12 years ago, I started putting out little snippets of poetry, again, without calling them poems, without, just little bits of writing out on the internet. I think this was pre-Instagram, so this is closer to Facebook times. Putting little pieces of writing, and people were responding well to them. To the point where then one poem went viral globally. And that changed something for me, right? It changed this idea of poetry being a thing of the past, because I felt growing up that, you don't say, I'm a poet. And you have to understand that when I was doing this about just over 10 years ago, we hadn't yet had this Instagram poetry surge, right? I mean, Instagram didn't even exist in India pre 2014 or something, right? So though that seems a very kind of thaka hua thing now, where it's like, oh my god, Instagram poetry, is it good, is it bad, is it legit? It's had this whole arc and come down and like plateaued and all of that. When I was doing this, it had never happened. So the last big like poetry boom felt like, I don't know, felt like Byron-esque almost, right? And it felt, to me, it felt like if you were telling people that you wanted to be a poet, I mean, that was a very odd thing to say. Like when I said that I want to be a writer, even that came across. And I come from a family that really respects the arts, but it was like, okay, can you study journalism, because then you might get a job? But like, I'm going to write a novel was like, no, no, you retire and do that as your hobby, right? The publishing industry in India did not even have proper Indian offices for most publishing companies. So like, sure, Penguin had an office here, and sure, HarperCollins had an office here, but their main task at that time was actually to bring to India books that were being published abroad. So even if you were an Indian author writing in English, you typically wouldn't sell to them directly. You would sell via the West and then have it come through back here, right? So it was a very different time. And in this time, to put poetry out on the internet and see that it was really moving people, wow, that was so powerful, right? So that's what happened with me. And then thanks to the internet and thanks to, the way things can experience virality, that happened for me. And I remember thinking in that moment, oh, wow. Okay, you can be a poet, because there was article after article that got published. And I'm talking about like everything from MTV to like International Vogue to like, Angelina Jolie's account to, and all these people across the world were like, this Indian poet wrote this poem. And I was like, oh wow, they're calling me a poet, you know, and that felt so weird. And it felt like success in some way, but it was a dream that I hadn't even felt I could dream, you know. So I took a moment over there, and imagine, even then, I didn't think that I could publish my poetry. I was like, okay, it's on the internet, and that's amazing, and I'll keep putting it out here, and how wonderful. And even friends of mine said, oh, you know, why don't you print like a little box set of postcards with your poetry on it? But nobody, I think, said, why don't you try and get this published? Because poetry was not being published. Poetry is published in like, you know, kind of like these niche little slim volumes of poetry that are like very often self-published or very often like a pamphlet put together. You know, they're labors of love, and they're just like, you know, but nobody was like, right, this can make money. You know, that's not happening, right? Um, and not that that's a measure of success in the world of poetry. You know, that's not the only and probably the last measure of success for poetry. We know that, right? But the fact that nobody was banking on it meant that nobody felt anyone wanted to read this. And what the internet showed us about just over a decade ago is that's simply not true. So coming back to my own journey, I immediately was like, right, I'm going to write that book. I'm going to write a novel. You know, that's going to happen for me, and I'm going to do it. And again, I started laboring over writing like a book and wanting it to be a hefty book and, you know, all those things. And then a publishing house actually approached me and said, hey, you know, we'd love to publish your poetry. And it was easily one of the happiest days of my life to receive that email. And I couldn't believe it. You know, I couldn't believe that I was lucky enough to live in a time where people actually were going to give poetry that respect. Forget about for me personally, it just felt like, wow, we are entering a very interesting time. Um, so what's very interesting now though is that despite having this poetry book deal, I ended up having my novel published first. And it was so ironic because after all that and after all the importance I'd given the poetry, and everyone said, oh wow, this is amazing, and this is what you're doing, and this is what's out there, and when it came down to it, my agent, my publishers, everyone who was involved in the project said, the first thing you publish cannot be poetry. And once again, I was kind of reminded of how people are just not going to take it as seriously. And I just didn't understand why. And I'm going to be honest, I still don't understand why, right? But for whatever reasons out there, there is this idea that a novel or a work of nonfiction has a lot of heft and deserves a lot of respect. And a book of poems is, you know, it's something you could have written in your sleep, apparently. And it's not going to sort of propel you to like this position of deep respect in the literary world. And I was really sad about that to some extent. And I understood what they were saying because I also understand what these perceptions are. But I haven't ever kind of been able to understand where they come from. And what's very interesting to me is that all these years later, though, yes, my novel came out first, and yes, it sold far more, and yes, my poetry book came out second, and in numbers, it has sold less. I never get the kind of responses to my novel that I have gotten to my poetry. And people love my novel, but people love my poetry. And that's not to do with me or my poems. It's an example I give of what poetry can do and the kind of effect that I think it has on people and the way it moves people. And I'm sure you'll understand when I say, when you're having a really, really bad day, if I asked you to pick up one book from your shelf and open it, you're not going to reach for the best novel you've ever read, right? Even if it's the greatest novel you've ever read, you will see comfort in poetry. And that is what I find so incredibly beautiful about it. And I think it says something about where we are in the world, politically as well, and socially and culturally, that we've forgotten the power of that and the strength of that. And we've forgotten that this is the one thing we actually should be perhaps putting money behind as an industry, because this is the one thing that can heal and that spreads the sense of comfort. It's the one thing humans actually reach for when they're feeling this way, right? So that's kind of like the backstory to my poetry being published in a roundabout way. I'm going to pause here and just ask if you have any questions at this point, and then I can maybe continue. You can ask anything at all, like whatever you want. Just do a hand raisey thing, and Saumya will, yeah.
Are there any questions that we have?
Can I ask?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah, hello. Hi, Karuna. Yeah, I actually wanted to ask that supposedly in your generation, supposedly your time, the problem was that there was no publishing house as such that wanted to publish poetry. In my time, I want to publish poetry. In my time, the problem is the AI use of AI. You can see that, right? So how do I like make myself come up to the top, you see, because there are many people who publish poems through AI, and if even if I do my hard work, I still don't get the main limelight because it's not that good as AI. So that's the main problem that we are facing now.
Okay, thank you for that question. That's really interesting. And it is a whole brave new world, right, that we're facing with AI. So, personally, I have really resisted using any kind of AI for a very long time, right? And I think it's because it makes me so incredibly sad. And I love the human experience. I think that there's absolutely nothing that can replace what we do. And I finally, just a few weeks ago, believe it or not, was like, right, you know what? I am going to use ChatGPT. Let's see what it does. The other kind of body of work that I've created over my life is in sustainability and ecological welfare, right? And I've done a lot of campaigning for that. I've worked in that world. Um, I find that anything that is going to destroy the planet at the speed that AI is actually does not deserve our attention. Um, and it certainly does not deserve our patronage. But I finally said, right, let me take a look at this. And I don't want to obviously get left behind, right? And that's, I think, a fear that a lot of people around my age do have that, well, if we're not going to use this, then, how are we going to walk into the future? So I decided to take a look at it. And Ankita, I want to promise you something. AI cannot write what you can. Um, it really cannot, because I played with it, I tweaked it. I was working on a document and I fed in 2 paragraphs of a book I'm working on. And, initially I said, hey, can you, remove these commas? Then, I was giving commands in to create what I could create perhaps from it, right? And when I came with the final version, using all my intelligence to give all the best commands I possibly could, the final version felt flat. I don't know how else to put it, right? But there is something of the flesh and blood and beating heart of humans that AI can simply not replace. Perhaps there will come a day when that happens, but I promise you, today is not that day. Today you win. Okay, you are the better writer. I promise you that. And interestingly, a lot of editor friends of mine are putting out some pretty aggressive posts about this, and I mean aggressive in the best possible way here, where they're saying that they're receiving a lot of writing that has used ChatGPT and AI tools, and they say that they can tell immediately. and that it's very embarrassing. And so, yes, you are in competition with people who are going to be using those tools, but I think you will come out shining if you don't. And I think we can use these tools to a certain extent when it comes to especially writing like larger bodies of work. And I think like for grammatical things, for checking, I don't know, look at how much I'm at a loss to say what it can do, because I just don't believe in it. But I truly don't think poetry is one of the things. And it is because poetry, the best kind of poetry, is unexpected. And AI replicates what is learned. Okay, so I think that's a very important thing to understand. And just before I joined, I heard Saumya talking to you guys about writer's block. And that was one of the really big things that I was going to tackle, So I was going to do this a bit later, but this feels like a great segue into it. So let's just get into it now. The same thing that will help you fight this, this cruel world of AI is the same thing that will also help you get over writer's block. It is reading, right? So I personally am not someone who believes in the formula of write every day. Okay, I know that there are many writers who will sit here and will tell you that you need to, if you want to be a writer, you need to write every day. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's entirely true when it comes to the arts, right? I think that I get so much fulfillment and so many ideas that I wouldn't have had otherwise from simply sitting back, from simply observing, right? Writing poetry, writing a novel, writing in general is very much kind of observing the world around us and then making sense of it through our words, right? And I don't think you can do that if you have your head down like this all day, or like if you're in front of a laptop all day. What are you taking in from the world then? That's not on your screen, right? That's not on your page. A blank page can only be filled with all of that. And so honestly, I think there are, whether you're connecting with nature, going for a walk, whether you are, just cooking something routine. So like, often when I'm cooking, because it's like, my hands know what to do, my mind frees up, right? It's why walking, as my feet, like, I'm walking in a circle around the park and suddenly my mind can open up, right? Um, and so it's all those things, and it's reading, right? Because reading exposes your mind to all these different ideas. So essentially, you are like, you need to, if you are thinking of yourself in competition with AI, then you need to absorb what AI cannot absorb, right? So AI cannot take that walk in the park and see a squirrel cross the road and, pause and like a child look at that, and AI cannot absorb that moment. Only you can absorb that moment, right? AI cannot read Sally Rooney and Virginia Woolf and understand why those two books mean something to you, because one time in your life something happened with your mother, and those two books interconnect in a way that no one knows your mother feels to you, right? That is something AI cannot do. And so I just feel like the reason I talk about writer's block and I talk about us being blocked as writers by a third party is really because I do think that the answers to it are the same and the remedies for it are the same. It is experience, it is exposure, it is opening our hearts to the world, it is opening our minds to ideas, all of that. I hope I'm making sense. Yeah, and I do find that, like, perhaps not perhaps, I do find that people, particularly men, sorry to the men here, the man here, like, tend to look on my view of this with some condescension, right? As if I am naive. And to that, I would like to say that it has never not served a poet to remain a little innocent. Is there any other questions? Did you want to say something to that, Ankita? Sorry, I saw you were speaking. Maybe we can unmute Ankita.
No, I was just saying that the
Hi.
last sentence you said is good saying. Yeah. The poet should always
Yeah.
maintain innocence. Yeah.
Yeah, because I do think that innocence and hope are also very interlinked, right? And I mean, I don't know if you've been following the work of any Palestinian poets over the last 2 years, but that's one of the recurring themes that I find, that, that innocence and that sense of hope, even in the face of devastation, has been incredible. And there are so many writing, but even if you just look into the works of some of the more famous Palestinian poets right now, like Mosaf Abu Toha, and you can find his work on Instagram, and it's a recurring theme. When he speaks about the strawberries of Palestine, when he speaks about hoping to see them grow once more. There's an innocence to that. And yes, you can treat it with condescension. And the same person who says, well, AI is coming for your job, whether you like it or not, is the same person who says, well, Gaza is flattened, a strawberry will never grow there again. And I think it's up to us to decide which kind of person we want to be as poets. Sorry, I'm just going to say, are there any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to go on to, yeah?
I think Divisha has a question. So,
Hey,
Divisha, yes, please go ahead.
Hi, Karuna. I would like to start with how honored I am to be here. This is such an amazing space for me, and I'm absolutely filled with confidence just because of you and because you're speaking here. Now, following on to what Ankita was saying, I have been struggling with AI for quite a long time because I'm coming from that generation where AI is absolutely taking over, and sometimes you can't even realize where AI is being written and whatnot. And what I've fairly realized by using AI myself is that a lot of times I read my poems and I realize that AI does not scratch the level of surface that I do. And when I look back at those poems, I realize, oh, there was a lot of depth in that I didn't even realize that I was going for, but I still went for that anyway. So the question I wanted to ask you with all that going around in the context was that did you ever write a line which you didn't really understand in your poems, but then you decided to keep it anyways?
That's such a great question. I have often written lines that sounded, they just come from deep within. You know that, right? That, sometimes we're just writing and there's a line, and it's often a metaphorical line. Like sometimes I think when we use metaphor, um, they metaphor and simile are often used incorrectly, right? And I think one of the important things to look for is, where has it come from, and is it making sense? I think you have to put it under the lens. And I think before you release a poem, it is extremely important to actually go over every line and ask, why have I said this, right? So I mean, let me try and think of an example. There's Okay, so something very simple is like, very often you'll hear when people are talking about, when they're describing particularly someone elderly, right? And say it's a poem about holding your grandmother's hand, right? You might use the phrase, her skin felt like paper, right? This is something that it's a phrase that has been used very often. Old people's skin is very often described as paper, right? Maybe you then turn it into her paper skin, right, for a poem. That's the next step in poetry, right? You take what would be a line in a novel and you sometimes condense it into, her paper skin against mine, right? But sometimes we lose our way, and you can end up with a line that's something like, her hand is a page against mine, right? Now, you know what the connection is between them, but does the reader know? And I feel like it's really important to put each line under the lens, because poetry comes from somewhere so deep within us, right? And you're offering that up. And sometimes in that, it's like these really dark, convoluted things that only we know and recognize. And I do find that while you're not writing poetry to be understood, that's not why we write it, or it might be one of the reasons why someone writes it, But I think there needs to be like a line between artistic license and disrespect to your reader, right? So I find like challenging a reader is one thing. You use your artistic license to challenge a reader, but there is a point where you're disrespecting a reader. And I've often found when reading, even when I'm reading books, I'm reading something really badly edited, where I'm like, why are you wasting my time? We each have so little time, right? I mean, how much do any of you, if anyone here feels that they have enough reading time in a week, raise your hand. You see? Yeah, so that's the thing, that I'm like, we each have so little free time, right? If I'm sitting to read something, that means I'm giving it a very precious part of my day, right? Each of you is. And so when I'm writing, I'm very conscious of that. And I'm very conscious that I'm not going to put something into the reader's hands or ask them for their time when I have not properly vetted it, when it might not make any sense to them. And if something doesn't make sense to a reader because that's not their experience, that's fine. But if it doesn't make sense because you've been careless, that's not okay. So I think it's absolutely okay, coming back to your question, I think it's absolutely okay to write a line that maybe doesn't make sense to you in that time. And I think it's good to keep it. I think it's good to work on it. I think it's good to go back to it 20 times over and say, what was I trying to say? Where did this come from? What do I mean? When I say page, do I actually maybe mean that her skin was like paper? Do I actually mean that I'm writing on a page to her? Do I mean that she's like an open book to me? Ask all the questions, put it in the best possible way, and then gift it to the reader. And I hope that makes sense. Okay, awesome. Hi, Parnika.
Ma'am, so my question is, and ma'am, first of all, I am very happy to be here, and like meeting you. A great honor for me. So my question is, ma'am, that let's say I write a book, and all people say to me that we have to write as per a scheme of like we have to write the words always. So like maybe I feel comfortable in writing in free verse. So is that okay? Because if like ma'am is that like acceptable in the community, like being in free verse, writing the poem in that way? That's my question.
Absolutely. That's why we have a title for it. That's why we have the words free verse, right? I will say this though, and I know that perhaps this is not a popular opinion, but I do find that because of the Instagram poetry phenomena that we saw over the last decade, and because of the kind of uh, you know freedom there was for everyone to just put anything they wanted out onto the internet, and for their friends and followers to be like, this is amazing, this is so good, and we got all this validation that you know was sometimes misplaced. um, I feel like it has created a space where instead of free verse, we just have become very free, with like putting anything out there. And I opened, a book. A young poet recently gifted me her book, which she had self-published, and a lot of the poems there, forget about free verse, they were not even complete sentences, right? So it was just like, they it um imagine a sentence like a single line on a single page saying, every time he calls, a part of me breaks, and that is it. Okay, that is not a poem, right? That is not even free verse. That, at its finest, is a bad day in your journal. Okay. So, and that to me felt like I was being disrespected as a reader. I understand that if I were going through a breakup of my own, and I could identify with this moment, I'd be like, oh my God, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. But it's still not okay to present that as a poem, right? It feels really, really lazy. And while, and I do think that, the Rupi Kaurs of the world, as much as I respect a lot of these artists who, paved way for like women of color, who have actually, arrived on the global poetry scene in a way that no one could have done before this, just because, the internet changed that. Um, I do think that we need to look at many examples of poetry. You can't just look at this one kind of poetry and be like, right. I mean, you might have a Rupi Kaur, but you also have a Tishani Doshi, right? And I think it's okay to look at both of these and be like, wow, it's incredible that Rupi Kaur takes up so much space, right? It's incredible that she has paved the way for hundreds of women of color to actually have their voices heard and their experiences known. And you can also look at Tishani and be like, wow, I absolutely love how much she has studied this as an art form and how diligent she is about that form, right? How every poet every poem in her books actually follows a structure of very specific classic poetry. And it's important to look at that and be like, why is this a sextet, right? Why is this a sonnet? Why is this a haiku? And to know your craft really, really, really well. And absolutely, poems do not have to. So I'm going to actually read you. Is it all right if I read a few of my poems as examples of things? I can even read some that I think are bad examples of things because I think when you when you write
Yes, please.
quite a while. Thank
Please
you.
go ahead. Please go ahead with your poems. I think that would be
Uh,
a good introduction also into your work and your style. When it's spoken, it's obviously different than when it's read on page. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I was looking for something that is not, that maybe doesn't. Okay, so here. So this is a haiku, and it doesn't rhyme. So it goes like this: Spider lick on breast. She is a seamstress mending. She knows what is torn. Okay, so it might seem that, oh, this is just like, this, but if you read it a few times over, it is firstly, I have followed the haiku structure. It is a perfect haiku structure. Um, it references nature, which, traditional haiku often does. The breast mentioned is actually a reference to the heart. She is a seamstress mending. She knows what is torn. So the entire poem is actually about a broken heart, right? And a spider is a seamstress. So there's also the visual of it. So this is a poem that took very, very, very long for me to write because it had to reference all these classic terminologies. It had to look into classic structure, but I wanted it to be simple enough for it to also just feel emotional when someone heard it, right? If you had a broken heart, I would want for you to read it and for you to love it. So that's one that did not rhyme, but that I feel worked. Then here. This poem is called Survival, and it goes, I have an unrivaled capacity for self-destruction, but that being said, I can draw the phoenix from absolutely any fatality. So again, it doesn't rhyme, right? So you do not have to have rhyming poetry at all. I don't believe you have to, but I do think then you need to ask about structure. You need to ask about what it is saying. And I think it's really important that it makes someone feel something. So yeah, if that helps. Okay, so just very quickly, I want to say like some of the things that I thought we could talk about today is one about, well, we started talking about Instagram poetry. So I thought that was one of the things we could talk about, online poetry, which I think would lead very nicely into us talking about publishing and about, you know, having one's work published, how the publishing industry works when it comes to poetry, things like that. Does that work? And then I thought we could talk a little bit about inspirations for poetry and, you know, how we structure a poem, how we put it together, which we've already also started touching on. But should we start with the online space? Does that sound good?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think we can start with that because it's very relevant to how poetry is accessed now. I see, I mean, I personally, you know, when I'm even traveling on public transport, I'm reading, you know, some poetry online. So I think, yeah, a lot of, you know, the way that we process poetry now is online. So we can begin with that and then, yes, touch upon the inspiration and the writing process, as you mentioned.
Sounds great. All right. So very quickly, do any of you put your poems out online? Have you at any point? Just a show of hands is good. Okay. So a few of us. All right. And is this, you know, if you can, is it mostly Instagram or yeah, is that kind of where or in smaller groups or poetry groups? No.
I have posted in Medium
Okay.
and
Do
yeah.
yeah, Substacks, things like that. Also, does anyone perform poetry? Like, have you performed poetry live anywhere? Spoken word? Maybe at Delhi Poetry Slam. Okay, fine. So that's interesting. But most of you know that, you know, obviously the online poetry space is pretty saturated, right? And I find that actually, sadly, that happens so very fast, right? For people who wanted to first publish their poems online, I think the time was probably a decade ago, right? And then what happened is, you know, there was this boom and people were like, this is trash. And, you know, and there was so much negativity around it. And as I said, now it's plateaued out. And, you know, we've reached this comfortable space where some people continue to put their poetry out, you know, very consistently, like say, you know, whether it's Nikita Gill or, you know, whether it's, there are several others, but many people have decided to refrain from it, right? The other thing is that I find a lot of people have also almost decided that if they want to be taken seriously as a poet, they should not put their poetry online, right? But that leaves us with this terrible conundrum of, well, how do I tell the world that I'm writing poems then, right? So I just want to say that I personally do not think that it is a bad idea to have your poetry online. I think one of the things you guys are very lucky about, and I'm guessing, are most of you, what age? Are you like under 30, most of you? Is that correct? Um, yeah. Sorry. Sorry, Soumya, I think you got stuck again. But yeah, are we kind of like that age group?
We can still hear you, and I think majority maybe, but a few of us are older also. Yeah, but majority, yes, 70, 75% probably.
Okay, cool. Um, yeah, all right. Yeah, so, you know, one of the things that I do feel is that you are lucky, most of you, if you are that age, that, you know, you have kind of survived the worst bits of the hatred of Instagram poetry, right? Like that is now also past. Like, you know, that's, I think the world is really over hating on Instagram poets. We've been there, we've done that. Yeah, we get it. Okay, fine. Everyone put a lot of trash out, and, you know, there were too many people, and all of it, you know, it's all been said. And now you are free to actually do what you want with it. And so I think that that's the really refreshing thing. So one thing I do want to say is that if you are looking to have your work read, it's not a bad idea to actually be putting it out. Unfortunately, we live in a time where you are expected to almost, your personalities are expected to be on display at all time, right? Whatever kind of person you are, it has to be announced. It's like, I like this, I do this, hire me, give me a job, give me a book deal, because I can do this. And it is really frustrating, especially for those amongst us who perhaps don't like this idea of self-promotion so much, right? It's kind of crass, it's kind of tiring. Um, and I think somewhere deep down there's this feeling like, oh, but I would love to just do the work quietly myself. And maybe, we all have the fantasy of being discovered someday. That someday someone is going to see my writing and is going to be like, this is so incredibly beautiful. Let me give you a book deal. Well, sadly, we live now in a time where, the more you're putting your work out, the more chances there are of people seeing it, right? And if Instagram feels like a kind of passé space for that, I do suggest having a Substack. I do suggest having, if it's a more serious medium, whatever it is, but actually creating a space where you can display your work, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with um, using the online to our like best advantage, right? So I am also someone who, I will say, benefited greatly from that, right? So that is why I advise this. I don't think it's necessary. It's not at all, but it does not harm your chances. So for example, as you already know, I got my book deal for my poetry book because, here, can you see it? Yeah. Yeah, so I got my poetry deal for this book because my poetry was online, right? I also managed to sell so many copies of it because I was online and because people got a glimpse of it. So they immediately ordered it. My books came out in back-to-back pandemic years, right? You would think that that would have been an awful crisis for sales, but it wasn't, right? Because people were sitting at home and reading a lot more. I was lucky in that way. But B, it the online space was where people were spending their time. And so I do not think it's a terrible thing to actually have your work displayed online. Just make sure it's very, very good. You don't want to put half-ass stuff on your Instagram poetry account. So I wanted to say that if you thought that I'm going to come here and say, don't do it, you won't be taken seriously, I do think that time is past. And I will say this, editors are really, really smart, right? A lot of them are constantly looking at the online space and checking poetry there. And they are giving out book deals based on that. Do you guys, sorry, I'm just going to, you guys know Meera Ganpati? This is her book. She is, it's called How to Forget. And it's a beautiful book filled with short writings and poems and little scribbles that she's done over time that just came out. And Meera, if you follow her on Instagram, her account is One Meerkat, and she got her book deal through her account, right? So I do not think it's a bad idea. She has, and her account, for example, is a great online space to look at to see how she's really, really built up her writing over time. So she uses art pieces, she writes slightly longer things. So if, they're kind of like mini essays, there's a lot of free verse. It's a really beautiful space and it's very genuine, it's very authentic, and she's made it her own. And I think that's a good example. Another person to look at is not a poet, but Rega Jha. So Rega Jha's Instagram is also interesting. She's also got a book coming out, and again, it was through the online space that she got her book deal. Okay, so don't think that it's a space that's done. It's very passé. It's very like thaka hua now. Like people are not interested in it. That's not true. Editors are still looking at it. And now that the noise is quietened down, it's actually a great time to be putting your work online. The one thing I will say is it's important to be consistent. So I also know a lot of people who kind of like, created an Instagram page for this stuff, posted like 4 random poems, then forgets about it. Then, it's like another random poem on Sunday. And then small things, right? Now, some of this is just marketing, right? If you're gonna put those poems out, maybe just use one font. No, it's not a font competition. People are just here to view your poetry. So it's not necessarily, I'm not looking for like the most colorful slide or the coolest format. I'm just looking for one consistent style that draws me in, right? So really concentrate, I think, on the words and leave the rest to just consistency. And I would say don't create one of these accounts unless you're going to take it seriously, right? It has to be, if you think that this is something that you can do, it has to be treated somewhat like a job, right? Where I'm not saying you need to write a poem a day, though that's a nice challenge to give yourself for like a 4-week period at some point or whatever, if you think you can. But I do feel you need to dedicate something to that poetry, right? It can't be just like whimsical. I mean, I also don't think, I find that it's pointless then. There's no point in starting an account and like announcing it and having friends follow it if you're not going to treat it seriously. So I think what I'm trying to say is you need to treat your poems really, really seriously if you want other people to treat them seriously. So yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to say about the online space, that I don't think it's a dead space. I do think that there is place for all of us to show our work there. And I do think it is worth looking at things like Substack and newer forms and newer spaces where you can share your work. And I will also say this, this is a good place to remember the respect the reader rule, right? Just because you have an account and just because you can put out the work doesn't mean you should put out every poem. Really, really go over it many times. When I was doing online poetry and when I was putting it out very frequently, excuse me, I would, my husband, who at the time was not my husband, he was my lover, and I was very often showing him these poems. And he's one of the harshest critics of my work, and I'm so grateful for it. But he would read the poetry, and very often we'd end up arguing about a line. And we would argue about that line or this word for so long. But I knew I could not put it out until we agreed or until I explained to him why I had used what I had used. Because he would say, no, but that's not making sense. And I'd be like, but of course it makes sense. It's the only word that could have come in. And he said, but I think what's actually coming across is this, and I think you can actually do much better. And I would be so angry. But that is the conversation you need to have, whether it's with someone else or with yourself, until you have trashed out every line and you know that this poem is ready to go out. Do not put it out. So yeah, let me see if I can quickly read a poem that. Okay, so I'm going to read you 2 poems. I'm going to read you one poem that, the first time I wrote it, the way it was, I felt it was fine, and I almost didn't change a single line in it ever again. And then I'm going to read you one that I changed a lot. Okay, so yeah. So this is a poem called A Personal Manual to Make a Heart Stop Hurting. And this is a poem that I wrote really fast and almost, in one sitting, and it's almost never been changed after that. And the reason I wrote this is because a friend of mine wrote to me one night and she said, and there's actually a great story about this, which I'll tell you at the end. But she wrote to me and she said, I am really sad tonight because, I've just had this terrible breakup. And how do you make a heart stop hurting? So I wrote this poem and I sent it to her, and it's called A Personal Manual to Make a Heart Stop Hurting. Every single thing you wish they could do, you begin to do for you. So you wake up tomorrow, begin just there, and make yourself tea. Flavor it with mint or rose petals or cardamom or ginger, whatever you like most. Then drink it, listening to Billie Holiday, Dusty Springfield, Hari Prasad Chaurasia, or anyone else who makes your bones come alive. The genius of your standing skeleton is that it can dance. Bathe. Water is the refuge of the broken-hearted, because crying in the ocean is just replenishing it. Cry in the shower. It is the second most graceful place to do that. Wear the green pantsuit you reserved for them when you reserved a table at that new Burmese restaurant you thought that they would like to try. Put on your red lipstick, or don't, ever again. Also, don't bother with heels if you don't want to. Much as you may repeat it to your colleagues, your life is not a balancing act. Work. Work so hard your castle descends from the air for you, brick by sturdy, sacred brick. And when your day is done, stop by the flower shop and buy yourself some tulips. Bring them home and place them in the tall glass vase that lies empty too often. Lay down. Stretch. Now book a ticket to that place you thought you would go together. Pour a glass of wine. This is your life. You're going to be fine. So I wrote this for, thank you. So I wrote this for my girlfriend. I sent it over to her. She was, she was moved. And this is the follow-up story to that, which is actually in the notes of the book. So it's the day after I published this poem online, a girl from North Carolina wrote to me saying, one of my favorite musicals, thank you, Saumya, one of my favorite musicals came through my state and I wanted to go, but my ex and I split up a few months ago and I'm still struggling with being alone. Tonight was the last showing, and an hour before it started, I bought the very last single seat ticket they had and I took myself to the show. And this girl wrote to me from the States and told me this, and it deeply moved me because it reminded me of the power of poetry. So that is a poem that I wrote in one sitting and that has barely ever changed. I think I changed one or two the names of colors in there, but let me read you one that I worked very hard on and that I changed many, many, many times over. So here. Okay, so this is a poem called Becoming. You are not the sum of the people you have loved. You are not the sum of the ones you have tried to, nor the ones you did not, but left your mark upon anyway. Even in your wakeful, difficult, sizzling cruelty, you are math more dignified than that. You are not your favorite gray t-shirt or your even now unquenched thirst for single malt. You aren't your first grade teacher's prophecy from when you were filled with an abundance of hope. Nor are you your ninth grade teacher's warning from when you began to lose in bundles the same. But maybe you are your big smile. At least that is how I would like to think of you. Your massive heart might as well be secretly filled with forest flowers, coming up as merry pranksters in its mulchy groves. And maybe, at least for me, you are the sunrise splashed across the sky, so brave in your bloodiness, forever rising even after sinking, fearlessly warm, transforming everything in your fiery wake. Maybe in the years that no one was watching, you unwrapped your litany of wounds, drew time out like a ribbon to yourself, and maybe, just maybe like a gift, you became hope itself. So this is a poem obviously about hope and the sense of it, about who we become when we lose it and who we become when we have it. I worked really, really hard on changing that poem many, many, many times, right? And this is the interesting thing about poetry. I wrote this poem initially, I want to say maybe 5 years before my book came out. And when I wrote it, I really liked the poem. And so I put it out into the world. And it was a poem that did really well online. People loved it, people reposted it a lot, people used it for different things. Um, and then when the book of poems was coming out, I actually felt that this poem was not good enough. And I sat down to work on it. And I worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. And I changed it. And I made it a lot wordier. I made it a lot more complex. And this version was published. And when this version was published in 2021, so let's say 2017, maybe I wrote the original. 2021, I edited it and it came out. And I was very happy with this version. And interestingly, recently, now in 2025, I read this poem and I know in my bones that the original was better. And maybe in 5 years, I will think differently again. But I also want to say that poetry is a moving thing. It is a living thing. It has a heartbeat. And I don't think, we are ever done with it. So, to come back to your question of like publishing and, when to put something out and whether, I have written something that I don't understand or wasn't happy with, yes, constantly. And I also think that it is a sign of your own growth when you look back on older work and sometimes want to change it again. And that's okay. So yeah, that's the story about a poem that I did not feel was perfect. Every 5 years it appears. So, and maybe I'll get a chance to re-edit it at some point. I feel a little bad for the poem. It's doing so much hard work every 5 years. Anvesha, did you want to ask something? Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were. Yeah. All right. I want to talk about. So that is, that's kind of like. Did any of you have any questions about the online stuff
I
and about
think
like,
Amala has a question.
yeah? Okay.
Hi, Karuna. So this is not something relevant to the thing that you're speaking right now, but I just wanted to. I'm just curious to understand something. How did you manage your life between writing poetry and your routine life? Because I feel like poetry is something that can occur. It is a kind of meditation, or you can write when you are moved by something or something stops you, right? So how did you manage to manage both? That is my question.
That's such a good question. Yeah, I don't very badly, I have to say. If it were up to me, I would live in a cottage in the hills and just write poems all day. But that doesn't pay the bills. So one of the things that I found really helped is so from the age of, I want to say 12, I always carried a notebook with me everywhere I went. And I became unembarrassed about pulling it out and writing down, a line when I felt this line needs to be written right away. And I think it was probably pretty pretentious, or it appeared pretentious to people, when I was like, just a second, let me, hang on a sec. The muse has struck. I need to write right away. But I think because I did it for so long, I think I became immune to how weird some people thought it was. And then, of course, with the advent of the smartphone, I started doing it in my notes section. And I don't know about you guys, but the time poetry most hits me, honestly, is in that space between dream and awake. And you're in this like space, you're just falling asleep, and your mind is completely kind of like slipping into dreamland. And it's right there where you're awake enough to think. And I have done this in the past where I've been like, oh, that's a beautiful line. I'm going to remember it in the morning. Yeah, bullshit. And you never remember it in the morning. And so I've made it a pretty good habit now to kind of like snap out of it, write down the line, and then go back to sleep. And I think I did it the other night. Hang on. I forgot I did this. Let me check. Maybe there's a new poem in me that I don't even know about. Let me see. I truly feel that I wrote down a line. Mm, Gosh, where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, so you're going to be privy to this. Um, and maybe you can tell me if this makes sense. Oh, it's a description of I recently went on vacation and I was in the mountains I was at a cottage and there were three cats with me. And the line that came to me in the middle of the night clearly is the cats are crucial, dainty, and cosmic. And I was trying to kind of like describe why the cats felt. I was thinking in my sleep, I remember now, why are the cats so essential to this trip? And so yeah, they're crucial, dainty, and cosmic. So wow, thank you guys. I would never have remembered that. But yeah, that is when the muse most hits me. So I've made it a habit to, again, like I said, coming back to what I was saying, to really respect your poetry. So if you feel, now what I find is you're not going to have a moment where you suddenly have like this formed line of poetry come to you when you are, in the middle of your accounting, or when you are in the middle of, uh, you know, I don't know, doing something that really requires all your energy. It is most likely going to come to you in a moment of relaxation, or a moment when you're either falling asleep, or you're in the shower, or you're walking somewhere, or you're doing something that doesn't require your mind to be 100% on it. So whatever it is, I usually find in that moment you can take 1 second out to actually write down that line. And I do find that it is important to give it that respect in that moment, because it does go away. Poetry is a shy creature. It comes to you and it's like, hi, like, are you gonna pay attention? Okay, okay, no, you're busy, bye, and it disappears. That is poetry. It's like, it's this really like ephemeral thing. And so I think it's important to grasp it and like put it down on paper very, very quickly. So whether you carry around a little notebook like pretentious young Karuna, or whether you pick up your phone and just put it into the notes section, or send yourself an email, or whatever it is, I think respect it in that moment, because, same as you, I find it very, very hard to kind of balance a regular life and poetry. But that's a great question. Yeah, I need to be more serious about paying attention to the muse myself.
Yeah,
So
loads
yeah.
loads of love to you, because I just wanted to confirm whether I'm feeling the same way that you are going through. So I'm just happy with the answer that you have given me. So yeah, I'm happy to
Thank
go
you. I
with
think
that.
all of
Thank
us
you.
feel the same way. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Ankita, I think you wanted to ask something, right? Yeah.
Hey, I actually wanted to ask that you were talking about AI. No, so you're talking about Instagram and that how I should put my poems out there. So basically, I do write poems very frequently, maybe 4 or 5 times in a week. Okay. But in the
Wow.
Instagram, mostly people follow up the reels, the new upcoming generation of reels, you see. And that has to be fast paced, the making of the reels, the making of the content. So I don't put my content out there. So how do I know, as a self introspection thing, how do I know that if I'm doing good? So I can't self-analyze the thing for myself, that if I'm doing good, if I'm in a position that, okay, yeah, that is my space that I have reached from this level to this level. I'm not able to realize that for myself.
Absolutely. And I just want to say that Instagram is not the place to figure that out. Okay. Instagram is the place to put your work, but don't trust the likes. That is, for example, the poems of mine that are the simplest always got the most likes on Instagram. The shortest, because people are like kind of like scrolling, they read one line, they're happy. If you put a 10-line poem, they're going to scroll past it, right? They're going to look at the next reel or whatever it is. It's only, say, when you build up an audience specifically for this thing, that people will, maybe that audience is a niche audience that will, enjoy reading a 10-line poem. But I don't think you can trust when a one-line poem gets like, 100 likes and a 10-line poem gets 2 likes. It's not because the 10-line poem is bad. It's because people have fried their brains and do not have the patience to go through a 10-line poem on this platform, right? So don't trust Instagram for your likes and followers are, I'm sorry, it's not an authentic way to understand whether your poetry is good or not. The way to know whether your poetry is good or not is to become very, very familiar with it, to look yourself straight in the mirror when you're writing a poem and really be true, really be honest with yourself. And also to create communities like this where you can trust and you can share your work and you can actually like banter it out and you can understand how it can improve, right? So again, that's the human element that would be missing on Instagram. Okay.
Divisha has a question. I think you can go ahead with it.
Hi.
All right, thank you so much. I feel like Ankita and I are absolutely on the same page on everything because I absolutely echo her sentiments. I myself have been experimenting with Instagram for the past 2 years, and I have been writing on Medium for the past 4 years, and I feel like there hasn't been much of the growth in that sense, and I have to experiment a lot of times, going from visual poetry to reels, sometimes cinematic feels something or the other to understand what the trends are, because a lot of times as a writer you have to understand it through the marketability point of view, and that really tunes down your creativity because you have to tone down your emotions for a second to understand how simply you could present it, only to get that sort of audience and step outside of that niche audience that you've created. So, a question that I specifically wanted to ask regarding this, as you have been writing and you have been getting a lot of responses for your poems, what would I specifically want to go for outside of my voice? Should I write poems which hurt, or do I write poems which heal? Because I'm always having this absolute, I can't find the balance. I genuinely cannot find the balance, especially in my anthology, because I can't understand what should I go for. Should I go for something that's making them to, that's inspiring them to go outside, finally get into their feelings, or something that absolutely lets them embrace their emotions and understand, okay, I feel like this and it's okay to feel like this, and someone else also hears my voice.
Yeah, so firstly, I do think that there is no division between poems that hurt or heal. I think that that's just a kind of like moniker that's kind of been, it's just like a made up thing. That's like, they're kind of like just like titles from like a very simplistic poetry book, right? There is no difference between the two things. Are you telling me that a poem that hurts you does not heal you in some way? There is no distinction, right? You should write poems that you want to write. You should write poems that feel true. I think those are the things to ask, not what do other people feel about this, right? I think the truest test is asking yourself these questions like, does it feel authentic? Is it true? Do I think it's good? Would I mind if the poet I most respect saw this? Would I be embarrassed or would I be proud? So I think you can ask yourself those things. And I really do think, since you said this hurt or heal, that sounds a lot like you're thinking about what the audience wants. I don't think as a writer we should ever really think about what the audience wants at the start. The first version, and if I've said anything that implied that, I'm really sorry. I When I say that, don't put out something that's that an audience member has to like, or a reader has to, suffer through, that's the end of it. You don't start from the point of like, what would a reader like? Let me write that. That is inauthenticity, right? On a page. None of us that somewhere means that we're writing for validation. You can't write for validation. You have to write so that your heart is emptied of everything it's feeling. Right? It is just until the very end, it is just you and the poem. You also need to ask yourself, if this poem never saw the light of day, if nobody ever read it, if it was just me and this poem in a tower, is that enough? Is this poem good enough for that? Right? Will it sustain me even if I would like, if it were just me and this poem left at the end of the world, would I be proud of it? Yeah, and as for Instagram, listen, Instagram is a beast, right? It changes its likes and dislikes every second day. One day it's reels, the next day it's like, oh, use a carousel. The next day it's like, you must put music on a post, otherwise no one is going to see it. The next day it's all rubbish, right? They do it in order to continue to keep you there, right? It's a dopamine hit. That's all it is. Choose one thing, stick to it, and just like remember that it is, if you're putting poetry on Instagram, that account is just an office space. Okay, you're going to go to that office, you're going to do your work, which is to upload a poem and put it out there, and then you're going to go home, right? You're not going to spend all day there checking it out. That's, it's like saying you're going to sleep in your office. Why? You just do the work that's required there. Don't fall for Instagram.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sorry, I've opened something. Okay, it's closed. Yeah. Yeah, please ask.
Yeah, actually, it's not much related to what you're saying right now, but it's related to what you were saying before about the publishing house.
Yeah,
Noticing from
anyway,
the
that. Yeah.
noticing from the content that we are uploading there. So my question is, do publishing houses, a genuine question, that if do publishing houses look for stories in authors before reading the manuscript or something like that? Because when I was writing my manuscript first draft, I submitted to many publishers and I had a talk with them. I asked them why exactly they're not selecting it. They didn't even read it. Okay. So they said that their first question was, do I have like more than 10K followers on Instagram? So I said no. And then they said that what is your story? I said, there is no story. I'm just a normal girl who likes to write poems and I'm writing poems like that. And that's why they said, ki, okay, try to grow on Instagram or other social medias first, and then we may think about publishing you. So do actually big publishing houses look for stories on authors, that their backgrounds, they should have a story, something like that, or for followers, or something like that? Or
So,
am I talking to the wrong
can I
one?
ask which publisher you approached?
This was actually in the World Book Fair in Delhi. I talked to the Penguin publisher, the editor there in Penguin Random House.
Okay.
Yeah.
That said, there's a lot of conflicting information about, whether publishers look for popularity, whether they look for Instagram followers, whether they don't. Um, some editors and publishers tell me that it's absolute nonsense and they don't do that at all, right? And if you see most of the books that if you look at, say, the top list of books that have been published by anyone, by Penguin, by HarperCollins, when you look at them and you go and look at the Instagram accounts of these authors, you'll be really surprised to see that they don't have very many followers at all. Like most of these authors might have like 1,000 followers or 1,700, and it's just their friends, right? And these are, I'm saying, some of the biggest books around. I mean, Arundhati Roy is not on Instagram, you know. She's not on a Facebook, she's not on a Twitter. So I'm not sure that that's true. Even, other big authors, like very big novelists, novels that have done really well in the last few years. If you go and look, like many of them are just not on social media. So any good publisher should actually not be judging your work based on your ability to sell it. That's their job. They have PR teams to do that. They have publicists to do that. Any good publisher should just be deeply invested in how good your work is. That said, it doesn't harm to have a following. And I'm sure when they see a following, they're like, oh, that'll help us sell the book, right? But that is usually not their aim, from what I understand. And I can tell you, based on the amount of authors out there who are not on social media, that this is absolutely true, that I don't think they really look at that. When it comes to your story, your personal story, that's not something that you might need to share on social media, but it is something that you should know for yourself. And I don't think it's true when you say, oh, I'm just a normal girl who likes to write poetry, right? That's no one. No one is just a normal girl who likes to write poetry. And I almost think that you're underplaying your own life when you say that. If you truly feel that you're just a normal girl who likes to write poetry, where's that poetry coming from? Like, what have you experienced then in your life that's making you write poems? Poetry comes from sadness. Poetry comes from experience. Poetry comes from a depth of heart. Poetry comes from frustration. Poetry comes from anger. So if those are things that you've experienced, you're probably writing poetry from them. Because otherwise, what is the poem that you're writing? Are you like, the wall is red and the day is blue and here I am, how are you? That's it. That's all you'll write then, right? But if you are writing poetry that you think is deep and so meaningful that it deserves to be published, you have a story. So you should own that story. No one is saying you have to put it on Instagram. No one is saying you have to write about that story. But when someone asks you, you should be able to say, if it's, I am so angry to be a woman in this world that's unfair to women. And that is where my poetry comes from. Or it might be, I hate what is happening politically around the world. I hate the marginalization that I'm seeing in this world. I hate divisive politics. I hate what's happening in this country. Those are strong emotions, but that is your story. That is what makes you who you are. And I wouldn't downplay that. Okay. I think those are the things that a publisher is interested in, because that's going to tell them who you are and why they should publish you and not someone else. When you say I'm just a normal girl, there are no normal writers. Okay, so don't do that to yourself, I'd say. I think, and this is what I meant when I said earlier, a lot of writing poetry is looking in a mirror and being very honest about who you are. And this is what I meant by it, right? And it'll serve you not just to write better poems and to just know yourself very, very well, but it will serve you when you present yourself to the world as a poet as well. Do we have more questions? Otherwise, I was going to talk a little bit about publishing itself.
Yeah, just one more question, Karuna. So, when I write, when I complete a poem, so I'll be the person who'll be the first one to read it and listen to it, and I'll be able to connect it to the most. But when I am sharing it with someone else, what will be the reaction, or what will be the question I should be taking in when they're saying I couldn't connect to it? Should I be adding a bottom line or top line for that? So this is about so because I have here like people saying I couldn't connect to it. So I cannot I can take it as a yeah, can you please explain on that?
Have you ever asked them why?
No, they are actually expecting me to explain like what you have written, but when I am reading that I could
And these are people you trust?
Sorry?
Are these people whose intellect and EQ you trust?
They know English, they know language. I do write in English, so I believe like
are they emotional people? Are they emotionally intelligent people?
I don't have an answer for that, but I do share with the people who knows the language, and I would love to be heard because I feel like poetry is complete only when it is heard and when it is understood. But when I'm all alone left, like I am the only person who understood about what I have written, that is some kind of feeling that is making me think like whether I'm going in the right way, whether my poetries are going to work or not. And even after posting in Medium, I'm not looking for claps, but even a single clap is making me feel that okay, someone has understood my poem. So how to make it feel connected with the people? Because I do feel like whatever connection I'm trying to give in my poems, it is actually working out for me. But how to make it more connected to the people? Like whether I should implement any of the tactics into the poem, any other strategies are there for that to speak technically more.
So honestly, I don't think poetry is not tactical, right? It is not something that there's no gimmick to poetry.
Yes.
And so the reason I ask the questions I do right now when you were speaking is because one, I do think it is really important to check who our audience is when we're asking when someone is saying I don't connect with that. It's one thing, for example, for example, I am not a mother, but I can read a poem about motherhood and I can empathize and I can understand how difficult motherhood has been for the woman who is writing about it with pain, right? None of us were around in World War One, but we can read Wilfred Owens and we can understand what it meant to be in the trenches watching our peers die before us, right? um, and that is empathy. So the reason I ask who your audience is or who you're sharing them with is because one, I think it's important to check that these people do have empathy and are interested in understanding your experience, right? Because I can present a poem to a truck, but it's not going to empathize, right? Um, so I think that's one thing that's really important to check who you are sharing this very precious piece of your heart with. That's one. And the other thing is, I think it's all right to ask them, say you share something with a friend and they say, I couldn't connect with this. I think it's absolutely okay to say why and ask why. And you will have your answer. And don't be scared of asking why. And if they say, I didn't understand it, then you could explain it. And if they say, I simply, I've never had this experience, so I don't know, then you also understand that it's not you, it's them. They're an unempathetic person, right? Um, and I also think that if you are lucky enough to have a space where you can share poetry with somebody, then you can extend it to these conversations where you can say, okay, what didn't you like about it? What didn't you understand about it? And I think also coming back to what we were talking about right at the start, I think maybe if you are getting that response many times over where people are like, we didn't get it, maybe you need to check if you're disrespecting the reader, right? Because if that happens once, it's one thing. If it happens twice, it's one thing. If it happens 10 times over, then perhaps you're trying to write in a way that is arrogant or might be too lofty, or maybe it's just for you, and that's also okay. But if you want it to be for other people eventually, then maybe you think about the reader. But like I said, think about the reader at the end. You actually sound like you're really happy with your poetry, and I love that. And I think that that for me is the most important thing. And if you are getting so much joy out of it, honestly, maybe that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Karuna. Yeah, thank you.
Most welcome. I'm glad that you're writing. That is the most important thing, that we keep writing for ourselves. Yeah. So about the publishing industry, which I wanted to talk a little bit about. So we've spoken a lot about it already, and yes, there is this kind of rumor and this idea that, oh, people are only published if their poems are on Instagram, but that is not true. Um, or if your poems, or if you have followers for your poetry online, but that's really not true. Some of the best books of poems that have come out in the last few years, whether from not all publishers publish poetry. For example, Pan Macmillan doesn't really publish poetry, but Penguin does, HarperCollins does, Westland, I think, does sometimes. And they don't pay a lot for it. I'm going to tell you that very honestly. Um, but they do publish poetry, and some of the best volumes of poetry that have come out in the last few years actually, I found, have are written by people who have no social media presence at all. I mean, one of the best poets I've read in the last few years is a guy called here. Uh, Avinab Arang Datta, and he has a gorgeous book of poems out. You can try and find it. Um, and I he does not even have WhatsApp. Okay, forget about, and the book is beautiful, and he's worked really hard on it, and he's had people like Jeet Thayil, kind of like say that his work is absolutely brilliant. And this is someone who does not even have a smartphone. He refuses. And so I think it can also be a choice that you make. Um, and I don't think it in any way diminishes the beauty of the work. In fact, it probably, or the worth of the work. Forget about the beauty. Of course, it won't do that, but the worth of the work to a publisher. And this is a book that HarperCollins published, right? So I don't actually believe that they're not looking at poetry if you don't have an Instagram following. Another amazing poet, I don't know if you guys know the work of Rohan Chetri. That's another. Rohan Chetri has two very beautiful volumes of poetry out, and I would strongly suggest looking at them. Um, so I don't think that's true. I think it's really what really can help is one, being really consistent with your work, two, joining poetry communities. So a lot of poetry communities actually do have access to publishers, do have access to agents. That is something that I would strongly suggest. Don't feel scared to write to bigger poets, asking them for mentorship, asking them to read your work. I feel like, please don't ever send anyone an entire book of your work. Nobody has the time. But, feel free to, a lot of big poets have, a lot of publishers also, editors have, for example, their email addresses, etc., available on their websites, on their company websites. Feel free to send like 3 poems and a cover letter and say, could you read these? And if you really like them, I'd love to show you more work. Don't feel afraid of that, of also entering a more serious world of poetry, right? I feel like a lot of people tend to like just write to a publisher, but why don't you actually look at specific editors? If you read a lot of poetry, at the end, there's always an acknowledgements. See who has edited your favorite books of poems, right? Find that editor's email address and approach them. Ask them how you can improve. 9 times out of 10, people may not reply, but once in a while, someone will, and they will give you that space. And I don't think there's any harm in it. This is part of taking your work really seriously. I also want to say that there are a bunch of, sorry, there are a bunch of fellowships and grants that you can get as a poet. So one of the ones that I saw recently is the Utkarsh Poetry Fellowship. Do you guys know about it? Um, so it's Utkarsh, Utkarsh, and it supports young unpublished poets, and their call for entries just opened on the 24th of June. So if any of you are interested, I would look into that. And there are many like that. I feel if you are occupying the online space, follow things like the Bengaluru Poetry Festival, follow these pages, follow things like the Himalayan Writing Retreat, they're always posting opportunities for poets, right? And I don't think there is any harm in applying to all these things if you feel that they might work for you, right? Um, Internationally, there are many, many fellowships for particularly writers, particularly women of color. Feel free to like look into those, follow up on them. There's a lot of money going around, particularly in the United States, for things like this. There's so much opportunity out there. I think sometimes we forget this, and sometimes you're like, how did that person take like a year out and go and live in this place and just write? Well, this is how very often they just did the really, really hard work of applying to these things and being very diligent about it, right? So if you'd like, there's plenty of those things. And all of these are non-traditional routes to publishing, but they do end in a publishing deal. Now, the other thing to remember is that when we think of a book being published, I think we often think of like, this beautiful hardback covered book with like, a massive launch party, and then walking into every bookstore and seeing your book there, and then it's like selling millions, and then, the true story of publishing is actually very, very different, right? You get paid very, very little. For a poetry book, you can sometimes get as little as 25,000 rupees, right? And that is sometimes for a lot of work. Like you sometimes work like 5 years on a book, and it's just something like 25 to 75,000 rupees, right? Imagine that being your salary for a five-year project, right? So it is a small amount. It's just considered like that, oh, you're going to have the prestige of having this poetry book published, so this is all we can do. um, more often than not, your book is going to come out as a slim little paperback, right? Because even 50 poems is what, a 25 or 30 page book at most, right? So it's a very, very slim book of poems usually. It often gets lost in bookstores. Many bookstores do not even have a poetry section, right? Um, so remember that, to check your expectations along the way with each of these things. And eventually, like, you may not even sell 500 copies of this book, right? And then it disappears from bookstores, and you might be able to buy it on Amazon, and that's about it. And that is the journey of a poetry book very, very often. And I know it sounds bleak, and it is in some ways, but I also promise it brings a lot of joy, right? And it just depends on what it is you want. And I think it depends on what your expectations have been. But I do want to check your expectations on this, because yes, publishing poetry can feel very bleak if you have very different expectations from the ones that I have just laid out. Do you have any questions around publishing? No? Okay. I read a bunch of my poems out, but I was wondering if each of you felt like reading a poem, and I thought that we could all listen and do one poem each, if that would be okay. If anyone does not want to, that's okay. But do you each have a poem ready-ish that you could read? Yeah? Why don't you go first? I love that.
Yeah, I'm so happy to do that. And just give me a minute, I'll just take up. And I have been waiting for such a day in my life, and I have never thought that it is going to happen so soon. And in front of Karuna, that is going to happen, and I'm so happy about that. I'm so lucky. So, Karuna, I will give you an option. Can I read about clouds, or can I read about the red roses? Which one I can dedicate for you?
Definitely books.
Sorry, red roses.
Definitely books, I said.
No. One is the clouds. Clouds. The other one is the
Oh,
red
clouds.
roses.
Oh, I thought you said books. I'm so sorry. It'll be clouds.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so this starts with my experience that I have experienced from my balcony of my home. So I'm just going to read it. You travel all along, your journey is time and beyond. You travel all along, your journey is time and beyond. On a heavy duty day, the Helios obeys for your aged mustach. You shelter thy beings by stepping in with your catwalks through the queue. Patient and graceful, are you the supreme power? You hide the great solar ball at the golden foyer. The dot barrel seemed to be so heavy, carrying liters of water moving wavy. Along your way, I don't find any spillage, but wondering who is so blessed to receive your homage. As I wonder, I manifest and surrender, now drenched at heart.
Did we lose the connection?
Yes, I think there's a technical lag on Amala's end. We can just wait for a couple of seconds, a few seconds for her to be back.
Yeah. What an inopportune time for the lag, in the middle of a poem. That feels unfair.
Yeah, we have to deal with things that happen with internet connections and Zoom.
Yeah.
Quite untimely, but let's see.
Hi. You dropped off in the middle of the poetry reading, so we lost you. So I'm gonna ask you to read it again, but can you start from the beginning and can you go a lot slower? Because it's so lovely, but I feel you were racing through it. So let's hear it like nice and slow.
Sorry for that. Sorry for that. Yeah, I'll just come again. So it is, this is my first poetry reading, so I'm not good at reading. Maybe, yeah. Okay, it's about the clouds that I have experienced from my balcony. So I'm starting with that. You travel all along. Your journey is time and beyond. You travel all along. Your journey is time and beyond. On a heavy duty day, the Helios obey for your aged mustach. You shelter thy beings by just stepping in with your catwalks through the queue. Patient and graceful, are you the supreme power? You hide the great solar ball at the golden foyer. The dot barrels seem to be too heavy, carrying liters of water moving wavy. Along your way, I don't find any spillage, but wondering who is so blessed to receive your homage. As I wonder, I manifest and surrender, now drenched at heart for the love you render. You are so pure, with your love for us, you overpour from the sacred space. It's our duty to handle your love with some emotion, to pass it for the next generation. Hey, you, the next one in the queue. Less ornamental, looking angelic. Like the moms at the kitchen, it never pathetic. The soft heavenly blankets, would it be a caring lap? Can they take a quick power nap? You're that cotton candy I wish to drag from the distant pantry. What's the secret recipe that makes you so soft and fluffy? How many patterns you derived, and you leave the decision to me to arrive? What's a divine message to me? You travel all along, your journey is time and beyond. I feel lost and scared when you leave me at the overcast. Just understood, the dark circles you make, it's just for a namesake. When you pour, I admit your love was truly pure. With the ray of hope, you weave the silver lining. Darkness faded away, it's now deeply dazzling. The space is yours, the vast space is yours. I'm on a cloud nine, I'm on a cloud nine. For the short chit chat I had you with from the balcony of mine. Ending up here, wondering, the soft couch is far away. How do I place an order to bring you to my balcony? Ending up here, worrying, where would I purchase a deep barrel to receive your sacred offering? The precious pour from the sacred space deserves a right place on the planet today to unlock a vibrant and radiant tomorrow. Yes, the little buds should need to embrace a nourished life with their mother earth without a sorrow. My thoughts sliding away, my thoughts are sliding away. A soul connect right from my balcony ended up with a sensible and soulful request from nature, leaving me to an agony.
Thank you for sharing that. I just want to say I did connect with it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I thought it was beautiful, and I really loved the bit where you speak about the sky as a foyer for the sun, the golden. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Who'd like to go next?
Ma'am, I would like to go next.
Hi.
Ma'am, I'm Kadambari Gupta, and the title of my poetry is Life is So Fragile. So I hope I'm audible to all.
Yep, you are. And
Okay.
welcome
So,
back.
yeah. So the poetry goes like this. Each day I hear a news that a life has suddenly come to an end. The breaths have stopped. A breathing soul has come to a full stop. Life has become today a test. Life has become today a test. Why so many young people are dying of cardiac arrest? Every day I open the Instagram account. Suddenly I feel how many breaths are more there for me to count. I fear every day. I sleep with fear every day, every night. Will I be able to see the next day? Will I be able to see the next day, the next morning and afternoon, the next morning and afternoon? I always feel what has happened today. Is it the COVID or what it is? That suddenly life is ending, and we only have that much to say. Oh, gone too soon. Oh, gone too soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was amazing. It's really, it's obviously not a happy poem, and I get that, but
Sorry,
I
I'm sorry.
that's fine. Don't apologize for that. But I feel like it really reflects very well kind of what all of us are feeling and the anxiety of our times. So yeah, exactly. Thanks, Shrishti. Exactly this. Yeah, I really kind of felt it in my bones. I was like, this is how I feel all the time, and I feel we're also not saying it. So much of the time we're not saying it. We just continue with our lives, and I think poetry is one of those places where we can pause and actually say it. So yeah, thank you, Kadambari.
Thank you,
Who's
ma'am.
going who's going next?
Hi, yeah, can I go next?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Sorry, will you hold on one sec? I need to just plug my laptop in.
Absolutely.
Yep, you're good. Tell me. Start.
All right, so a little context for this poem. It's one of the first I started writing when I was publishing on Medium, and this is also the preface to my anthology. And why I chose this was basically because this gave me the reason why I wanted to write. This was the beginning of the story, and the issue with this is it was written as an emotional timestamp, and it was written to be read and not to be spoken. So there are certain pauses and there are certain M dashes, and I might not be able to reciprocate those, but I hope that it still connects with you all. So starting with it, 10:50, the earth shakes. In a few minutes, so are we, laughing like we always do, spinning the world on our fingertips as if it could never slip. There's an earthquake, and here we are on the phone, joking about death like we're owed a lifetime, like we're untouchable. 10:54, a thump. I am sorry, she murmurs, a vague silence, and then nothing. She vanishes, no goodbye, no reason. Her parents must have called. I think, I hope, perhaps, and I wait. 11:15, stillness. The earth has stopped shaking, but now I am. My hands shake, my mind races, 100 thoughts orbiting around just one name. What was she apologizing for? Is she all right? Is she? There's a pause. 11:20, a scream. Everything stops. My heart, my lungs, time itself. I know something is terribly, irreversibly wrong. I call for her desperately, uselessly, hoping she hears me. From wherever she is, I should have told her. I have to tell her. I should have told her that I loved her, that she was my absolute everything. She had to be there, she had to know. But I hadn't said enough. 11:25. Hello? I feel the air around me again. as she speaks hello again. The lump in my throat shatters, tears flood my face like they never have, like they never will again. I have never believed in God as firmly as I did that day. She is here. She is here. And I cannot speak in, not now and not ever. That night, I made a vow. I would never leave words unspoken, never walk away thinking I said too little, never give the bare minimum when it came to love. Thank you.
Thank you. I really love like poems that tell a story. So, I love that there's the timestamps and that you're building up to something. And I don't do poems like that too often, because I think I'm a little scared of them because they take some commitment. Um, but I really, really enjoyed going on that journey with you. Thank you. Who's next?
I would like to go next.
Okay, so Upamanyu and then Anvesha.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah. So the title of the poem is Hear Me Out. Hear me out before I sleep, before my sorrow makes you weep, before my tales matches with yours, before the words spill the sours, before some news that yesterday brought, before tomorrow that you once had sought, before these pages you might as well read, before my advice you scarcely need, before my rhymes make you frown, before the liquor in which you drown, hear me out. For the night is short and the story too long, for silence suits my tempered song. For you might wonder what is new, for ages you have drank the brew. For a journey down the memory lane, for blurry eyes masking thy pain, hear me out. Before etherized, as Eliot would say, allow me to prick, if I may. Prick, gnash, make wounds so deep. Memories of the pain you must keep, and now and then, writher in pain, smile that life was not so vain. Smile that you can still smile, can still wait for a while. Poets, lovers, and all who needed proof as to why I walked aloof to make you believe. Perhaps pain forgotten, do I dare relieve? Dare to think, dare disturb the night, dare disturb the dreams, my dreams, dreams of a dreams that shroud me tight. Hear me out, your ears I lend, your voice to try and bend, what time, perhaps, too casually had sought to mend. Hear me out, whisper my songs into the night, reach my lover, whose sleep is light. Hear me out, and pass her the dope, for I hope, and I hope, and I hope she will hear me out. Thank
Thank you. That was wonderful. I really loved your references to Eliot as well. It's really beautiful. It's a really nice one. I thought the poem was going to go in a really dark direction when you started, but then it doesn't. It actually goes towards hope. It's really beautiful. Thank you.
you.
Um, Wonderful. Yeah. And absolutely, I agree with Soumya. The delivery was really great. Thank you. Um, all right, Anvesha, let's hear yours.
Okay, so my poem is simply titled She. It is one of the poems that I wrote this year only. And I really like it's sort of a free verse. It has some places where it rhymes, some places it doesn't. And it has many pauses. So it goes like this. It begins the moment she leaves the womb, expectations defined, comparisons already in mind. It worsens the moment she speaks her first words. Then it worsens yet again. As she steps foot into school, her mind is still innocent, still somewhat sane, but soon she meets the atrocity that is reality and decides to call herself a fool. Who's better than whom? Names she can hear. Hers on the bottom, her greatest fear. She grows up and then it worsens again. For now, she is met with the frightening stares of men. Hair too short, face too wide. The reflection in the mirror isn't what she had in mind. When did it start? People often ask. When did you lose your charm? And when, dear child, did you become so hard? Why are you quiet? Why don't you eat? Why do you constantly stare at your feet? If only I were better, she thinks. Would I be happier? Would I smile? Or would I be afraid of losing everything that I think is mine? Because years it has taken to get to this point. Layers and layers of words and looks slowly build up. Strip them down. You will find a crying child, inconsolable. It has lost its mind. Everywhere there is the great face she puts on, staring at the weeping form. What have I become? The question lingers. There will never be an answer, for she doesn't know who she is when no one is around. For she is the reflection of the people she faces. She is the layer of emotions undefined. She is the mess afraid to show herself, yet who herself is, she can't find. For it begins the moment she leaves the womb, expectations define, comparisons already in mind.
Wow, that got me in the gut. I have like a series of feminist poems myself in my book, and I always find that they're kind of like the bloodiest poems that I have. Like there's so much anger in them, and I could sense a kind of mirrored anger in your poem as well. So thank you for that. Um, I don't know if you know the work of Kate Ware. She's an American poet, and I think you'd love it. And your work reminded me of her. So yeah, and I love the circularity, how it comes back to the same verse. So yeah, thank you so much.
I think I was mainly inspired by poets like Sylvia Plath because
Yeah,
all her poems are so aggressive, but in the best way ever. So I
yeah.
wanted to write something that would yell, but in a way that is practical.
Yeah, and I mean it does, and I think I could also feel the pain behind it. So that was really wonderful. Thank you. Parnika, yeah, let's hear from you.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, so the poem is black and white. The world, my transient home, where I live all day, is black and white, where goodness and evil reside, misery and happiness side by side. In every house I go and each person I meet, a tale in them that eyes tell me. Some people live in darkness of the night, and some see bright skies and the beauty of life. I look at myself and see where I am. I am in bright skies. I wonder of those who aren't. I wonder of those left alone who have no home. One day I become as deep as the sea, a beautiful butterfly. I fly and spread smiles. I become the light of their darkness. And then I reach a place where no one decides, where I find peace and my true home.
Wow, thank you. I almost wanted you to go on. I was like, was there more? Yeah, thank you so much. That was really lovely. You have so much empathy, Parnika. It was such a deeply empathetic poem. Thank you for that. Um,
I think Sonali can go next if she'd like.
yeah.
So I don't really ever read my poetry out loud to other people, but I'll give it my best shot. So just as a background, this poem is about my grandfather. So, and I have worked on it multiple times. So this is not the original poem, like you mentioned, Karuna. Some poetry requires a lot of work. So I wanted to do him justice and like the memory of him a little more. So okay, it's called December. December is a dream, a memory sunlit, forgotten. Grandfather's winter garden in the valley Doon. I am sunshine in this dream, and sometimes I am steam, wafting off a cup of chai, illuminated by a sunbeam. Often I am tart, splotches of purple upon the tongue, fruit of the jamun tree under which he would sit, the man in whose lap my whole world would fit. Hues of orange race across my vision, watercolor magnolias blooming in unison, as I twirl with childish abandon. Of worry, there is not a trace, as always I am enveloped in a warm embrace. Will I see him again? The child in me asks. Gently I entwine her tiny fingers in mine and lead her through that graveled way to a sunny garden where we play.
Wow. So well. So now, can I just say that it is so evident how much work you've done on it, and I mean that in the best way, because it feels like there was not a word out of place. Even, I mean, the brilliance of rhyming, unison, and vision, like that was so perfectly put. I was like, what is she going to say next? And um, I can feel the work, and I can feel that it's been polished, and it's a great example for all of us, actually. Really, really wonderful. And um, it made me want to meet your grandfather, and I'm sorry that, yeah, it's really beautiful.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. It's not the easiest thing to share one's poetry. And so, Ankita, I was like, where do we?
I've left. If you're okay, you should listen to me still.
I'm more than okay
Okay.
to. I would be overjoyed to.
Yeah, so this poem has a background story. Like I'm part Assamese. Some words here are from Assamese, and like Aita we say as my maternal grandmother we say Aita. So rest of the words I'll explain as I go on for the poem. Okay.
Yeah,
So this is based on what I observed. Actually, I'm an advocate, so I worked in Delhi High Court for some time. So when you go to the Delhi High Court, you see many simul trees, that red flower tree, that with the big flower. So this poem
yeah.
is on that. The title of the poem is 10 Dipped in Red. So here it goes. The petals lie crushed on the road, like withheld testimony. A rickshawala rides over them, the red stains maturing beneath his tire, just after he collects his 20 rupees for dropping at the court gate. My clothes, white and black. So I add a note of color to the monochrome, a cherry wine macaron shade on my lips. The shade of red that refuses to lower its gaze. But will I too be folded under silence of adjournment today, like the rucked simul crushed and cemented with dust in this concrete ground? Outside courtrooms, the pollens float with old gossip, verdicts, whispered within supari anchored teeth of constables, and a splash of crimson like that of dusk spilling from the cracked pomegranate's heights at the corner walls behind the bare axe, where someone chewed too hard while deciding why one should be bailed and who should be shamed. We never fought wars at home. At 10 a.m., Aita used to find her daily peaceful settlements in the mornings lalsa. Lalsa is like the black tea, so we call that lalsa. No complaints, no cross examinations. She taught me to drape life as simply as she gathered the three pleats of her Muga Mekhla Sadar to be worn with grace of sharp creases and how to pin it to softer voices. At 10 a.m., Ma turns to orchids, planted once with faith in the dry summer soil. The kopo now blooms. So kopo is the national flower of Assam. The kopo now blooms, holding off the 4 a.m. spring fire sparkling in the sky. She says, gods don't wear uniforms, but they arrive, always, only with patience, on places where you want them to be. At 10 a.m., inside the premises of Delhi High Court, the smell of sweat spread along with the scent of absence and old papers. I don't remember the citations. I remember the hiss of Panch Furan in Aita's Karhai, where even fermented rice had its flavor. No landmark cases can reverse the mark on wife's skin or account for the quiet way a mother loses custody because she stayed at home. The 14-year-old no longer counts the nights her body was opened, just knows it began with the pawn shop uncle and ended with too many doors closed. And yet I walk in with documents, with doubts. My watch striking 10 in the morning. The road looking like the red carpet, lined not with roses, but with simul petals, tender, bruised, unwept. And I hope the bench is not empty today, and the gods remember to sit, and that somewhere in here, shows tenderness towards all things red and crushed. Thank you.
You brought in so many different aspects. It was so good how you pulled it all together. And it's so incredible to see that, you have the flower and you have the high court, and then you have this thread of family and how you like wove them together like a braid. Super. Really, really wonderful. Um, all of you, thank you so much for sharing. I wasn't sure if you would be open to sharing your poems, but one of the great joys for me as a poet is to actually hear other people's poetry. And I wanted to read you two things. One of the things that I wanted to share was a quote, um, which I saw yesterday, and I said, "Oh, I'm definitely going to share this um, with you guys." So it's a quote from Philip Larkin, and it says, "Oh, for Christ's sake, one doesn't study poets. You read them and think, that's marvelous. How is it done? Could I do it?" And that is how you learn. So for me, as a poet, my journey of learning includes this. It includes listening to you guys, remembering, learning along the way. And I know we've crossed the time, but if I could just take 1 minute, I would. Yeah, Soumya, can I just read one thing? Is that all right?
Yes, of course, go ahead.
Thanks. So there's a poem that for me I come back to every time I kind of feel lost with poetry. And it's written by Julia Cameron. And I don't know if you know who Julia Cameron is, but she was the woman responsible for writing a book, which is a seminal artist's text called The Artist's Way. And you might have heard of The Artist's Way, you might have been told to do it. It's almost an exercise book for an artist to follow. And I think till date, it is probably the world's best artist manual. And it was also a course that she put together, that she taught, I think, through the 70s, 80s, 90s. She's a brilliant woman. And this is a poem that she'd written. And I always come back to it when I'm feeling lost as a poet. And I will send this to Saumya so she can share it with all of you later. But I'm going to just read this out as a parting word. Never forget that writers are prophets. We speak in tongues, we testify. We are for each other a believing mirror. Our words make us visible. Our listening makes us heard. Never forget that writers are soldiers. Our writing is the long march, the walk into time. Each word is a drum. We sound it across great distances, reaching one another and ourselves. Every poem is a day's march, a celebration more necessary than water or wine. Every poem is a drink of blood. Never forget that writing is an act of courage, not on the days when it is simple and we discount it, not on the days when it is hard and we write like sand. Our words are torches. We pass them hand to hand and mouth to mouth like a burning kiss. Never forget to say thank you because every syllable is grace.
Thank you.
It gives me goosebumps every time, and it is so powerful. And I'm going to forward it actually to Soumya right away so that she can share it with you. And I hope that you find strength in it on days when you don't find poetry. It has been such a pleasure to meet all of you. Thank you so much for signing up. I know that it is not everybody who wants to spend a Saturday evening doing this, and I'm deeply honored that you would choose to spend your time with me. So thank you so, so much. And thank you, Soumya, for asking me to come here. Thanks, Shrishti. It's just been really, really lovely being a part of this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karuna, for being here with us. And I think, what I've felt today is definitely very, very inspired. I know that you've been very honest, with sharing like everything, about your journey with publishing and your journey with like finding an audience through social media. And it's really nice that, you didn't really sugarcoat anything like, oh, it's so easy to get out there and do this thing and you're going to be paid so much for it. I loved, your transparency and honesty with this. And I think as poets, people think that poets are very soft at heart, but I think being here in a community of poets, I know that most of us are willing to go through that struggle because there's just so much hope out there with someone actually finding your work and resonating with it, that we are willing to do all those little things that actually is needed to get your work out there. So thank you. It has been a really inspiring experience for me. And I think, before we probably get on with some of the questions, as well as a very brief feedback round, which will basically just take 5 minutes or so, I would love to share a poem because, yeah, I've been watching all of you share one. So this is a very short poem, and with the, everyone's permission, I'd love to take up 2 minutes of your time. So I have been writing like a lot with my individual experiences throughout my life, but recently I've started writing on my collective identity, and I am from Bihar. So that is a state which has a very complex stereotype going around with, the way people are from there. So, and a lot of people migrate from different, from Bihar to different cities around India. So there is, a large population living outside Bihar that faces a lot of discrimination based on these stereotypes. So this is a very short piece on why do people leave from Bihar, and how we basically mingle in the cities where we arrive as migrants. When I think of my motherland, Bihar, it's easier to leave than it is to come back. What do our people leave? Every season, the same worry. Will it be the insect or the flood to spoil our crop? When there's nothing to eat, we leave the village. Our backs carry nothing too, but within the strength of our ancestors and the resilience to build our lives afresh. And so we build in the city. As migrant workers, we build your bridges and houses and roads and shopping malls. And sometimes we lift your bags at the railway station. And sometimes we beg, but rarely for money. We beg that you give us work. And everywhere we go, they say the people of Bihar are very strong. Even so, when in the night our bones are tired from a day of labor, but stomachs fed, do we feel the weight of a certain homelessness? Do we think of a land which was ours, the faces of people left behind? What's there to miss home when home is within us? The will, the strife, the determination to outwork everyone. There's no turning back for people like us. We want rather the promise of a future than the ownership of yesterday. Thank you. Um, Thank you. I've taken up 3 minutes of your time. That was longer than I expected it. I didn't really time it much, but it has been such a refreshing experience to listen to each and every one of you. I've been, reading through your works, of course, because we are compiling them into an anthology where Karuna will also be contributing 3 of her poems. So I've been reading through your works, and I've had like so much. I mean, I find so much diversity in your voices. There's just so much different lives, so much difference in the lives you've lived, and the way you have put those across. in your writing. And I'm looking forward to, seeing what we all put to create together in this anthology. And I know that there will be a lot of feedback from each and every one of you as you read each other's works. You'll find more about one another, more about how you see life differently, as well as the opening up is much more, and we find ourselves so much more porous when we read each other's works, when we at a sharing and a gathering like this as well. So I just wanted to obviously ask anyone if they have any questions for Karuna before we move on to the feedback round. I think Anvesha has a question, and maybe someone else will also, have a question from today's session.
Right. So basically, I write a lot of poems. So my school has a newspaper and they ask for poems. So once I submitted a poem which had a slightly political aspect to it, they said it could not be published. Then I submitted a poem that talked about gender equality and how women have to face so many hardships, and then they also denied it. So, and then sometimes I write poems and I think, should I really share these with people, because these are topics that are considered so taboo, and then I don't feel as happy about those poems as I would if I write a happier or nicer poem. So should have you ever faced something like this? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Oh yes, I've definitely faced something like this. Can I ask which school? Like,
Amity.
okay. Not that it, I think makes a difference. I think most schools would have some degree of censorship at this point. And look at what's happening in institutes like Columbia and places like that. I do want to say something, and it might not feel like that right now, but you're on the right side of history. And keep writing the poems that you are writing. Keep, your school newspaper is not where you're going to be published. Your work is too good and too incendiary for that. I've just heard you read a poem. Trust me. I didn't even realize you were in school, right? Uh, so I just want to say that your poetry is far beyond what a school paper is going to understand, or that's not your audience. And I think by being in circles like this one, you are seeking the right company for your poetry, and I do think your poetry is really going to go places. But stay true to your voice, and I don't think that you should um, compromise on the topics you're writing on just in order to get published in something like a school paper. Your poetry is going to see far greater stages. So just keep at it. And anytime you feel like you need validation, come to us. Don't go to them. So yeah, I
Thank
hope that
you.
helps. Yeah. Please be
Thank you
true
so much.
to. And Saumya, I didn't get a chance to say your poem was incredible. It was really, really amazing. And it was, it was such a specific thing, and it took me back to COVID, in fact, and what we saw with migrant workers across the country. And it was, I kind of viscerally felt transported to that time and what I was feeling in that time. And, I live in Bengal, and I'm sure you know about the constant kind of battle between local Bengalis and Biharis, and it gets pretty violent at times. And I know about this, this attitude of you don't belong here and you don't belong there, and really who belongs where, uh, you know. So yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you. Thank you, Karuna. Your words mean a lot. And I think, yes, I have been writing a lot on the collective identity of the state I come from. After, obviously, like when I was in school, whenever anyone asked me where I'm from, I felt like a sense of embarrassment saying that I'm from Bihar because, it's mostly. Yeah, there's so many stereotypes.
Yeah.
But yes, yeah, I've been exploring that, and I absolutely know like what Kolkata is like, and how there's so much labor that's done by people from Bihar. And obviously, like with all states, they're not very happy to have like a migrant population, because jobs and everything. But yes, yeah, thank you so much for your words. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are there
Well,
any other questions that we have for today?
I also want to say that, I understand that, I've spoken about many different topics. We've gone from AI to, publishing poetry, publishing it online, how to structure poems, free verse versus rhyming poetry, so much else, the personal, the political. So if at some point, there is a sense that, there's something you would like to ask me and you feel like you haven't had the chance to, please feel free to get my address, my email address, and just send me a message there with any questions that you might have, follow-up questions, because I understand, like, we may not think of these things immediately. So yeah.
Hi, just to bother you all with one last question. It's regarding the structure of the poems because I've been struggling too much with how to balance my poems, especially when I'm creating an anthology, because I need to know how it's sounding as whole, and I am trying to understand what the length of my poems should be, because during the editing phase I have to cut out a lot to understand, is this really relevant to the poem, is this adding anything, is this showing another emotion which isn't being portrayed in the poems. Because when I'm putting my poems out and it's in the dimensions of 5.5 into 8.5 inches, it's coming as 3 pages, and I understand that as a reader, if you're having so many poems out of a few, most if majority of those poems are 3 paged poems, a lot of people end up not really linking to it, even if the poem's really rich with emotions, even if it's hitting you, sometimes people tend to get bored by it. So what should I it, essentially do for it? Should I
So,
cut down?
so, honestly, this idea of like really short poems is a very new idea, right? And it was really prompted by like a Twitter space and an Instagram square. But I don't think you should let that stop you, because if when a page can be endless. I mean, look at something like The Wasteland. Like, you don't need to say a poem is done when a poem is done. A poem is not done when a reader is bored, right? And you will have readers who are bored by line 2, and you will have readers who are like, oh, I wish it went on a little longer, right? So I think that honestly you should follow what is good for the poem and what is good for the story you are trying to tell and the emotion you are trying to convey. I don't think you need to worry about how many pages it is in a book. I mean, if you change the font size, it'll be 1 page. So that doesn't make sense really. So just I think be true to the work. Yeah, and maybe look at some traditional structures, maybe look at some classic poetry structures and see how are you working in relation to that? Like, read up on, say, what a sonnet is, and then try and write a poem in a sonnet. This is actually just a good and interesting exercise anyway for poetry. Yes, we should break all the rules and we should challenge them and all of that. But sometimes it's interesting. So, for example, for a long time, I just did this one exercise over and over again where I was like, could I write a ghazal? Could I write it in actual structure of a ghazal? Could I have it reference itself the way a ghazal references itself? Can you do it where every single um, line ends with the exact same word or a rhyming word? So there are all these rules to traditional poetry. So sometimes as a challenge, just try and approach your poems like that and do these as exercises, and that'll make you more familiar with poetry structures as well. I hope that helps. Any other questions? You're welcome.
I guess that's about it. Don't think there are any other questions. Um, all right. So, I think we can move on to the feedback round, but I just wanted to say once again, Karuna, thank you so much. I know that you've been preparing for this session and you've been really looking forward to it. And given that, this is the time, this is a time in your life when there's so many things going on personally, and yet, you found the time to be here with us and to be such a source of inspiration to us. It really does mean a lot, not just like saying this on a professional level, but saying this on a very personal level.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, we're very grateful to have you here with us.
Thanks, Soumya. I do just want to say before we do the feedback that that means a lot, but it actually means even more to me that you asked me because, one of the things for those of you who don't know is that about 15 months ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And it was a very difficult time in my life, and I continue to be in cancer treatment. And I obviously my health is, up and down, and it's been a very, very difficult year and a half, and it promises to be, a long time before my life is normal. And one of the things that happens when you're unwell is that you fade away from the public, right? You fade away from the forefront of people's minds. And for a long time, nobody even asked me if I felt like doing anything like this. And so I was deeply touched when you reached out and you said, would you like to do this? Because if I ever needed poetry in my life, it is now. And I think most people have forgotten that. So thank you for remembering that I exist and for including me in this world. So thank you. Yeah, we could do
Thank
this.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I've been following your story as much as I can. Your personal story as well as the works that you've created, but on social media. And I think someone who follows you, like, kind of reminded me again that yes, that you're writing and that you're sharing. So there's someone we published last year, Sneha, and yeah, it was like a mutual connection thing. And I think she has also, like, I reached out to you with her work. But yes, so it's a really small world, so I'm glad that we could actually do this, because the universe kept reminding me that I needed to connect back with you. So here we are. All right. So, a very brief feedback round for the participants. I have two questions, and I'd like you to answer, one question after the other. So, the first one is, using one word, what's your state of mind right now? And the second question that I have for you is, what is something that you've taken away from today, and what is it that you're looking forward to tomorrow? So maybe that is actually three questions. So I'll just repeat that so we can, know what we're answering. Using one word, what's your state of mind right now? And what is something you've taken away from today? What is it you're looking forward to tomorrow? So who would like to? I think I can just call out one after the other. So Amala, would you like to answer first?
It's too hard to say in one word, actually. I would say the universe has aligned me to the proper place. I have landed in a proper place, so I'm very happy about that. And the key takeaway is I'd like to say hear all these poems, and I'm wondering like how people are pouring out, and the way that they are expressing themselves is very awesome. I just want to take the key points from them, like the style that they are following, and I would love to implement in my poetry as well, so that I can have a place where I can grow up and show up further. So I'm very happy about that. I'm inspired by every one of you here, and it is a very I feel very honored to present my poem in front of Karuna, and I'm very happy about that. And she responded for my poem, and every one of you here are pouring out love. So that is the thing that I was expecting, and I'm deeply satisfied today for being here. And it is a very grand stage. Though this is an online session, this is a grand stage, and where we are allowed to exhibit our talents and skills. So this is a great place for the budding writers and the poets. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Amala. It really means a lot. Ankita, would you like to go next?
Yes. So today, I think if I have to sum up in one word, I think it will be peaceful. So in the last few days, I was in a state of mind where I was confused whether if I'm the authority of myself, that if I am good enough, if I'm not good enough, like that. So after today, after listening to Karuna especially, I am motivated especially to stay original and not be inspired by all the AI, Instagram and everything, all that. So I think, yes, I'm very much motivated right now to be original. And yeah, I'm looking forward tomorrow to know about more about publishing, if that's okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. We'll be discussing that tomorrow a lot. All right, Ankita, thank you. Anvesha, would you like to go next?
Yes, if I had to sum up today's session in one word, I think it would be I felt very safe and accepted because it just felt like because in my school and everywhere, it's not a very common thing. I have never done anything like this related to poetry. So it felt like I belonged here. And one thing I really enjoyed was I got the lesson to stay true to myself. So I know that I shall not be changing my opinions for the sake of just getting published. And tomorrow I just look forward to another session that's going to be fruitful. And I'm just content with everything that has happened today.
Thank you. All right, Divisha, would you like to say what's on your mind next?
Okay, I think this is much more on the spiritual level because the one thing, if I could describe this in one word, I feel elevated. I absolutely feel elevated. It kind of brings me back to the first time I ever had an interaction with Delhi Poetry Slam. It was in my school, and I was so thankful that there was a workshop that I attended because I remember I was so lightheaded that entire day. I was feeling on top of the world. I felt absolutely amazing, and that's how I feel right now because I'm surrounded by these emotionally rich people who actually understand what I'm going through and who have so much to give. They feel so much and then they give so much. And, hearing those poems, it just felt like, it's a really amazing space. And I think the one thing we don't realize a lot of times is, the little things matter. Like someone telling you to stay true to yourself, it actually matters because you forget. And the one thing I specifically learned was to genuinely focus on my words, focus on writing instead of focusing on what the other person perceives about my writing. Because for the last few months, all I've been focusing on is how the reader perceives, how the reader understands, how the reader feels. And I realized that I have to focus much more on pouring than letting anybody else understand what I'm writing. And that was very, very fruitful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Divisha. Appreciate it. Kadambari, would you like to say what's on your mind next? Are you still here with us, Kadambari? All right, we can come back to her a little later. Parnika?
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, first of all, thank you for I'm very lucky to be here, and I'm grateful to be here. So, thank you for the chance I got. It's all because of you and your wonderful team. Thank you so much for that. Um, and for me, I think the poets and the way they spoke was beautiful. I think every emotion they expressed was so, I would say, perfect. And from this uh, from this experience I learned that you know expressing emotions and speaking them out makes you feel more lighter, it makes you feel better. And uh, and and I'm hoping for more about publishing work, the next ones, the next workshop. I'm hoping to learn about publishing and all that. Very, very interesting that I think.
Thank you, Parnika. We will be covering about publishing tomorrow, as well as how to, build your readership online. All right, Sonali, would you like to go next?
So at the beginning of the session, I'd said that I'd felt like a beaver, making a little dam for ourselves. Karuna, my answer was a beaver as well. Yeah. So now I feel like at the beginning, I was picturing myself as a beaver swimming around in my little dam, but now I feel less alone. And I feel like there's like a bunch of beavers swimming in this little pond that we've created. It's lovely.
I mean, you definitely aren't alone because there's another beaver with you. Like, this is so amazing. Like, I never heard that. That's awesome. That's made me really happy.
Thank you, Sonali. Upamanyu, I think you're one of the only participants left.
Uh, if it has to be one word, it maybe fellowship or some sort of comfort. So like after attending the session, like it doesn't feel like you are alone. And when you get to hear all these poems and the wide range of emotions, you feel you feel a sort of independence that it is okay to express yourself properly. You don't have to abide by someone's views just because more people accept that. So that is one thing I take from the session, and lovely hearing all the poems. Definitely.
Thank you, Upamanyu. All right. I'm not sure if Kadambari is still with us. So, in case you still are, then you can drop a message on the chat or something. But yeah, we will still ask Shrishti to answer the one word and also to answer what she has taken away from today. You still on mute? Yeah.
I'm unmuting myself. Um, so today was a great day. Sorry, I'm going to go a little long on this one. I do feel very satisfied. Um, we often at Delhi Poetry Slam office, we often sit down with a lot of poems that are sent to us by people from around the world. People send us books that they have published. They want their feedback and review, and we're always going through poetry. But when we actually get to meet the person who's writing the poetry, see them, interact with them, you get to see like a broader perspective, like the background of it all. And today, being with you all and just seeing your faces and the little gestures and everything that you've been sharing with us in the way you say stuff, your voices. It makes me feel very satisfied and content. It makes me feel like the world is a beautiful place. And I think Karuna said that in the beginning that, we have so much going on in the world right now, difficult things. So we often look at news and we forget that there is beauty somewhere, that people are trying, that there is hope. And seeing all of you today, it's like, oh, wow, there's beauty, we just don't see that on TV maybe, but it exists everywhere. So thank you so much for that. That is what I take away from today. And tomorrow, again, I look forward to meeting you all. And we are going to talk a lot more about the new platforms. I think we discussed Instagram, but now Medium and Substack are the new platforms. So we are going to have a first movers advantage there if we get on them. And it's also a little less distracting. Instagram is way too much. So, we can just focus more on our writing there. So we're going to discuss that. And I hope you all are going to be very excited and that you look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Shrishti, for sharing your thoughts. And yeah, I'm equally excited for tomorrow. Karuna, do you want to, is there one word for your state of mind right now? And I think you can avoid the tomorrow question, but what is something that you've taken away from today?
I feel resurrected, if I need to use one word. And I just want to thank each of you because, like I said, it's been a very difficult time in my life. And for the first time in maybe 25 years, I am not writing poetry right now. And I think it's because it's just been too difficult. And I think if I sat down to write poetry, a part of me would just shatter. And so to be able to come to a space of poetry and a space of sharing poetry like this, I'm not sure you realize the immense privilege it is to be here. So thank you very much. And it's why I used the word resurrected. So thank you so much for giving me that today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Karuna. Thank you, everyone who's been with us today. It's been really a very wonderful evening. And now, I have like faces to the poems that I've read. And and I'm really also looking forward to seeing, how we, how we put together the anthology, as well as seeing, what we discuss tomorrow. So it's a bit of anticipation from me as well as I prepare the sessions, and I hope that it will be a lot of fun, but it will be a bit of technicalities that we will be covering tomorrow. So I hope that you're in to get a little bit bored, but yeah, I'll try and make it as fun and interactive as possible. Thank you once again, Karuna, for being here. You've been very supportive throughout the sessions, and you've shared so much experience with us. And thank you, everyone. I'm wishing you, everyone, a very lovely evening ahead, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Take
Bye.
care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.